The happy life of a fun seeker in Marvel. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 576, Trip to the Temple of Heaven. As everyone was preoccupied with their own thoughts, the bus quickly arrived at the north entrance of the Temple of Heaven Park. From here, continuing south, you'll reach the central axis of the Temple of Heaven, where you can visit the Hall of Prayer for Good Harvests, the Hall of Echoing Sound, and finally the Circular Mound, which is actually the proper Temple of Heaven. Construction began in the 18th year of the Yongle reign of the Ming Dynasty and was renamed the Temple of Heaven in the 9th year of the Jiajing reign. The Temple of Heaven is surrounded by two walls, dividing it into the inner and outer altars. The main ancient buildings are concentrated in the inner altar, which is divided into the north and south by an east-west wall, connected by a gate. The inner altar comprises three ancient architectural complexes, the Circular Mound, the Altar of Prayer for Good Harvests, and the Jai Palace. The Altar of Prayer for Good Harvests is located in the north, the Circular Mound in the south, and the Jai Palace in the west. A 360-meter-long, 28-meter-wide, 2.5-meter-high Danby Bridge connects the Circular Mound and the Altar of Prayer for Good Harvests. Surrounding the inner altar are the East Heaven Gate, North Heaven Gate, West Heaven Gate, Guangli Gate, Xiaoheng Gate, and Taiyuan Gate. The entire structure adheres strictly to the architectural style of a round sky and a square earth, even clad in blue glazed tiles throughout the main structure. The Temple of Heaven's main structure is arguably the most rigorous and comprehensive in terms of form and construction in the history of ancient Chinese architecture, even surpassing the Forbidden City in some respects. Every brick and beam here carries a unique meaning. This is no exaggeration. If you're unfamiliar with the area, you'll simply be amazed by the skill of the ancient craftsmen. However, if you hire a guide who isn't just half-hearted and tells you a story, you'll be truly astonished by the supreme ingenuity of these ancient artisans. Compared to this ingenuity, so-called technology becomes merely a sideshow. The simplest example is Odin, the mighty god king of Asgard, one of the most powerful figures in the universe. Even after hearing all about the Hall of Prayer for Good Harvests, he lamented that his own palace in Asgard was nothing more than a thatched hut built of gold. If even Odin could express such sentiment, one can only imagine what others felt. This isn't an exaggeration. The Hall of Prayer for Good Harvests has 28 golden Nanmu pillars, 4 of which are inlaid with golden flowers. These 4 pillars divide the entire hall into 4 bays, representing the 5 elements of gold, wood, water, fire, and earth. The dragon and phoenix stone in the center represents earth. The 4 pillars also represent the 4 symbols, representing the 4 seasons of the year. Within this circle, there is a circle of 12 red pillars called the golden pillars, each representing the 12 months of the year. The outermost circle also has 12 eaves pillars, representing the 12 hours of the day. Together, these 2 groups of pillars make up a total of 24, representing the solar terms. Adding the 4 central dragon well pillars, there are exactly 28, representing the 28 constellations. The 8 shorter pillars above them add up to a total of 36, representing the 36 celestial constellations. Walking from the East Gate, the entire distance is 350 meters. 72 years, 7 plus 3 equals 108, representing the 108 earthly fiends. The celestial constellations, the 5 elements, and the 8 trigrams, all represented in this small hall of prayer for good harvests. It was the supreme ingenuity of these ancient craftsmen that inspired god King Odin to exclaim that his palace was like a toilet built of gold. So, how do you think these foreigners understand the celestial constellations, the 5 elements, and the 8 trigrams? Well, forget about a limited culture group of 4. They simply don't understand. They just applaud and exclaim, "It's amazing." Every detail is so well thought out. As for the 3 big guys, there's no need to elaborate on ancient one. Having lived so long, he's naturally well versed in rabbit stuff. As for Odin and Frigga, thanks to yesterday's cultural exchange, they now have a general understanding of what these things are. Of course, since they were already here, Sherlock and the others, adhering to the principle of since you're here, you have to see everything thoroughly, left no part of the Temple of Heaven untouched. They even failed to cross the Ghost Gate, the gate used for slaughtering animals. What? Why would such a sacred place as the Temple of Heaven have a terrifying name like Ghost Gate? It's quite interesting. According to experts, the emperor used to sacrifice animals during the time, and the path they had just walked was reserved for the emperor and his ministers. Animals like sacrificial animals were not allowed to use it. And most importantly, the servants were afraid that the animals would disturb the emperor's carriage and cause their own deaths, so they built a special passage below for them. And because every animal that entered this passage never returned, it earned the nickname Ghost Gate, a folk nickname. Unlike Sherlock and the Big Brothers, who understood some of the history and rules of the rabbit, the limited culture foursome was completely stunned after just one visit to the Hall of Prayer for Good Harvests. They simply couldn't understand the things the experts were talking about, like the 5 elements and 8 trigrams, or the heavenly gangs and earthly fiends. And most importantly, they dismissed them as magical Eastern magic. Wanda and Quicksilver, already in awe of Eastern magic, finally gave up trying to understand what it all meant and instead went to take photos with the 2 girls, carefully ensuring they didn't violate any taboos. Unfortunately, due to their age, Sherlock had prepared handfu for the girls. While the girls' traditional attire complemented their beauty, Quicksilver and Wanda's casual attire seemed a bit out of place in the surrounding scenery. However, their incompatibility didn't stop them from admiring the beauty of the ancient buildings in Rabbit Country. After all, the ancient architecture in Rabbit Country is unique worldwide, and you won't find it anywhere else. Of course, since they were already here, they naturally couldn't miss the cultural and creative shops that resembled travel souvenirs. This was a common refrain worldwide. And most importantly, the cultural and creative products at Rabbit were undoubtedly more than a step ahead of those sold abroad. After all, if you go abroad, the most you'll find are metal figures, refrigerator magnets, keychains, or small pillows. But at Rabbit, you can even buy jewelry. The quality of Rabbit's cultural and creative products is truly exceptional. Speaking of which, one can't help but complain about abandoned Chief Dayan Museum. Who knows why their signature cultural and creative product would be an Egyptian black cat? Doesn't Salvation even try to hide his bandit identity? Sherlock expressed his confusion and was deeply shocked by Dayan Museum's shamelessness. Of course, since they were already here, Sherlock wasn't going to be stingy. With a wave of his hand, he swept through the cultural and creative shop. Of all the cultural and creative products he bought, Sherlock was most satisfied with the 2 palm-sized plaques with the inscription "Purple Air Coming from the East." He'd even planned to hang them on his door when he got home. If he ever had time to visit the Forbidden City again, he'd have them hung on his bedroom door. Besides the plaques, Sherlock was also very pleased with the earrings he bought for Wanda and the 2 little girls. He found these traditional Chinese-style accessories surprisingly well matched with both his apprentice and his 2 little girls. It's fair to say that beautiful people look great in anything. Sherlock was incredibly satisfied. Chapter 577, Barbecue One's Barbecue. After the day's journey, Sherlock and his group separated from the professor's group at the west gate of the Temple of Heaven. 2 minibuses, each carrying a different group, headed off in 2 different directions. Unlike Sherlock's jubilation, the professor's spirits were somewhat subdued. Partly because they had walked quite a bit this afternoon, and partly because they were all quite advanced in years. Partly because Sherlock, the man they had been waiting for so long, hadn't used that magical golden mist. After all, they had been anticipating Sherlock's magic for so long. Didn't you see the history professor who witnessed Sherlock's magic at Prince Guang's mansion and, after returning, launched no fewer than 5 new projects in just one afternoon? They were eager to experience this kind of academic research, which was practically free work. Even if they weren't in the history department and couldn't start a project, the chance to witness ancient events firsthand was captivating enough. Unfortunately, they didn't experience the same miracle again, which dampened their interest. Crucially, if it were anyone else, they might have asked Sherlock if they could try it, but Sherlock's status as an officially invited VIP made them hesitant to ask him for a try even if they wanted to. Unlike the professor's subdued mood, the atmosphere in Sherlock's car was undoubtedly much more lively. As soon as they boarded, everyone eagerly began to divide the spoils. Even Ancient One took out the things he bought at Prince Guang's mansion and began distributing them. Everyone got a sizable collection of their favorites. Of all the cultural and creative products, the most outrageous was Odin's purchase. Look at Odin, the mighty god king of Asgard, wearing a Hall of Prayer for Good Harvests hat and beaming with delight at the Hall of Prayer for Good Harvests model building blocks in his hands. What, you're saying this isn't normal? Well, let me tell you, That so-called Hall of Prayer for Good Harvest's hat is not a normal hat like a duckbill or a bucket hat as you imagine. Instead, it looks like one of those poopy hoods that only show the face. How would you view Odin in front of you? Sherlock couldn't bear to look at it. What made Sherlock even more upset was that he also liked Odin's ridiculous Hall of Prayer for Good Harvest's hat. As for what made Sherlock feel the most upset, he actually had no idea where Odin got this ridiculous hat. Sherlock dared to swear that he visited at least 2 cultural and creative shops in the Temple of Heaven, and he didn't find any cultural and creative shops selling the same hat as Odin. Sherlock was a little upset, and he very subtly expressed his jealousy and desire for Odin's hat. It was just a pity that Odin didn't even notice Sherlock. Also, don't let the movie fool you. Think about Thor. How could parents who raised a clown like Thor be serious? In the movie, Odin's seriousness is simply a function of his status and position. After arriving on Earth, the old man lets loose. Sherlock has long seen through his playful nature and can only say that Thor is his biological son. Of course, aside from this little hiccup, the only option left is dinner. For Sherlock, tomorrow is the banquet he's been waiting for. So tonight is Sherlock's last chance to savor the delicacies he's craving. After all, Sherlock has already decided not to eat during the day and must save space for the banquet. As for tonight's meal, honestly, Sherlock has already planned it. Have you seen those videos on Douyin of state-owned restaurants in the imperial capital from the 1970s? One of them, called Zizzy Barbecue, has won Sherlock's heart. Just watching the slices of meat being seared on the giant iron grill by the chef using a plate and tongs was enough to make Sherlock's mouth water. Before crossing over, Sherlock had saved videos of this kind of thing, and after crossing over, before going to bed last night, Sherlock unexpectedly saw the video again, which made Sherlock unable to resist the urge to try it. Anyway, Sherlock no longer cared about the money in his pocket like he did in his previous life, so this time, Sherlock would definitely fulfill his pre-time travel wish. Therefore, Sherlock simply waved his hand and asked A to find a place with the most authentic barbecue for everyone to try. As he said this, if it were anyone else, A would at least consider the money in the other person's pocket and find a shop with relatively good value for money. After all, this thing is still a well-established business in the imperial capital. There are not many barbecue places like this on the streets, but there are still quite a few. But when the person in front of A transformed into Sherlock, with a wave of his hand, A immediately understood what Sherlock meant and led the group straight to the original location of Zizzy Barbecue. Also known as Nanwanbiji, Karawan is a well-established restaurant founded in the 25th year of the Kangxi Emperor's reign in the Qing dynasty, boasting over 330 years of history. In the early days of the imperial capital, Nanwanbiji was a household name. Karawan has evolved beyond its singular focus on barbecue to become a comprehensive dining brand. It's no wonder the imperial capital is a haven for hidden talents. After Sherlock placed his order, the moment the dish arrived, he knew he had made the right choice. Compared to places like Quanzhou, which have a more commercial atmosphere, this place, while boasting a strong commercial feel, retains the flavors of traditional BJ. The saying that one can savor the traditional flavors of the Kangxi era is more than just talk, it's truly authentic. Of course, the prices weren't comparable to Quanzhou's. Their group of 10, besides a large plate of barbecue, also ordered over a dozen other dishes, plus a bottle of wine for Odin. The meal was a full zero less than Quanzhou's. Sherlock, however, felt that even if it was a bit pricey, it was worth it. He wasn't going to dwell on the barbecue, as it was their signature dish, but even Sherlock, who wasn't a chef, could still say he devoured the rest of the dishes with a gusto. Of course, everyone has their own preferences. Take Quicksilver, for example. He wasn't particularly interested in Sherlock's so-called barbecue. The reason was simple: Quicksilver hated cilantro the most, and this dish was overflowing with it. Of course, even Quicksilver had to admit, aside from the barbecue, the dishes tasted excellent, at least much better than the burger and fries at the Eagle Sauce restaurant. Chapter 578: A Legendary Banquet. 1. Logically, because he had to attend the performance on the 4th day, Sherlock, uninformed about the schedule, hadn't planned anything. It was also a break from the 3-day Special Forces tour. But what Sherlock never expected was that, early on the 4th day, despite wanting to sleep in, he was yanked out by A. The reason for waking Sherlock up so early was simple: there was so much to prepare. Even though Sherlock and his group were attending the banquet as guests, anything official was anything but simple. These things should have been standard practice, but none of Sherlock's group knew anything about them. So, early in the morning, everyone except the three big guys was yanked out of bed by Pepper's and gathered in a large auditorium for training. The training focused on etiquette and manners. After all, this was a high-profile banquet, and everyone was brought in by Pepper herself. She wouldn't just let them take over such a prestigious event, would she? Of course, despite the high profile of the banquet, there was also good news. After all, while it was a high-profile event, it wasn't a public one. Furthermore, Pepper, Tony, and even the others had been exposed to the rabbit's culinary culture over their long lives by Sherlock, so they didn't have to follow the traditional banquet procedures of catering to foreigners, with cold appetizers and the like. In fact, at Pepper and Tony's insistence, the entire banquet was conducted according to Chinese procedures, which surprised the rabbit's bosses, who happily agreed. Even so, proper etiquette still had to be observed. It was during this unique etiquette training that Sherlock saw Pepper and Tony for the first time since landing, after they had been busy for over 3 days. Pepper was still as efficient and effective as ever, her aura of a powerful woman only growing stronger. Tony, on the other hand, looked as if a female demon had drained his vitality, a bit listless. But despite his lack of energy, Tony still exuded the aura of a successful businessman. Sherlock, for some reason, always felt resentful when Tony glanced at him. Compared to the limited culture quartet, Sherlock, in his previous life, had been a 996 office worker. Although he'd only attended drinking parties before crossing over and had never experienced such high-end banquets, he knew all the proper table manners. Because of those drinking experiences before crossing over, Sherlock even had a knack for eating quickly and elegantly. After all, at a drinking party, if you don't eat before your food arrives, you'll definitely be the first one to be carried out. So, Sherlock only listened to Pepper's training, focusing on the key points he hadn't learned yet. Tony seemed to have caught Sherlock slacking off. Taking advantage of Pepper's training, Tony cautiously sidled up to Sherlock and began whispering to him. "I've been checking your moments for 3 days now, and it looks like you're having a blast." Upon hearing Tony's words, Sherlock glanced at him in surprise. He could actually detect a tinge of jealousy in Tony's tone, a sourness like 1,000-year-old vinegar. If Sherlock didn't know what Tony was being sarcastic about, then he'd be out of the game. Giving Tony a scornful look, Sherlock lowered his voice to ensure it didn't disrupt Pepper's training, then spoke softly. "It's certainly fun, but don't you need to take care of business with Aunt Pepper?" Tony's expression twisted instantly after hearing Sherlock's words. After hesitating for a long time, he spoke cautiously and tentatively. "You know, Pepper is the CEO of Stark Enterprises." Sherlock interrupted Tony before he could finish his words. He looked at Tony with disdain and whispered back. "Then why don't you come out with us for a stroll? Why are you so jealous?" Hearing Sherlock's teasing, Tony became a little impatient and immediately retorted. "You didn't even invite me, so how can I go out with you? Are you sure you'd come out even if I invited you? How do you know it's impossible if you haven't even tried?" Tony Stark and Sherlock. "What are you two talking about? Do you want me to come up and speak loudly for everyone to hear?" The two were in the middle of a heated debate when they were discovered by Pepper Potts. Seeing someone dare to slack off while she was working so hard on the training, Pepper Potts was furious. The fact that these two people were her husband and her nephew, both close to her, infuriated her even more, and she started to yell at them. As for Sherlock and Tony, well, one was the renowned Iron Man, the other was a mysterious wizard. Together, they were a notorious entity in the universe. It was like a mouse meeting a cat. After being called by Pepper, they immediately sat up straight, like students being called by their teacher. Anyone who didn't know them wouldn't have noticed the playful banter they'd been doing just a minute ago. But even though they were sitting properly, Tony still felt a bit uneasy. After all, he'd come all the way here, and he'd been working so hard, while Sherlock was having so much fun. Tony's mind was completely unbalanced. Growing increasingly angry, Tony finally decided to talk to the rabbit's bosses at tonight's dinner and get them 2 days of fun. At the very least, he wanted to see something a casual visitor like Sherlock couldn't possibly enjoy. What Tony hadn't expected was that even a simple hint from the rabbit's bosses was met with laughter, and they generously agreed to arrange it. You'd be surprised if the rabbits actually had a specific process for handling VIPs who shared Tony's sentiments. After all, there were some things you couldn't find anywhere else in the world except at the rabbits. Of course, all this is in the past. Back to the present, Sherlock had originally thought that after completing the most basic table etiquette training, he could at least return to his soft bed for a nap. As it turned out, Sherlock was still too young. For the evening banquet, the so-called etiquette training was just an appetizer. Chapter 579 The Legendary Banquet, 2. Sherlock had never imagined that a banquet would require so much preparation, not only from the host but even from the undergraduate level. After a basic etiquette training session, the women at the event left, led by Pepper. Sherlock was still a little curious as to why all the women were being taken away. But that curiosity quickly turned to fear. It was simple. According to Tony, the women would need to spend an entire afternoon getting ready for the banquet. And crucially, this makeup was unlike the usual celebrity red carpet looks you see on TV or your phone. There would be no exaggerated, sexy styles. All looks were to be dignified, elegant, and proper. This meant that green hair like Lorna's was definitely not allowed. Similarly, among the remaining men, Quicksilver's white hair was also not allowed. So, sadly, Tony sent the young man to the women's area to deal with his white hair. But that didn't mean Sherlock could relax. Compared to the extensive facial and hair treatments women put in, Sherlock's was no less demanding. Unlike women, however, Sherlock's attention to detail was even greater. From the manicure to the matching and styling of his dress, every detail was meticulously considered. Sherlock swore this was the first time in 2 lifetimes combined that he'd experienced a manicure. Honestly, though, he still had to praise the experience. After an hour-long manicure, Sherlock swore he'd never achieved such perfect nails in his entire life. He even narcissistically said he felt like his hands could be hand models. After all, aside from the nail file, Sherlock didn't recognize any of the other tools involved. Of course, that was just the starter. There was much more to the process, like the coordination and neatness of his outfit. After 3 hours, a meticulously dressed Sherlock emerged, adorned in a formal attire. Thanks to years of exercise, Sherlock looked like the protagonist in the movie Kingsman under the suit he was wearing. From top to bottom, he exuded 2 words, elegance. It was even difficult to find a wrinkle on Sherlock's clothes. But at the same time, many times, good looks don't mean comfort. That's right, after Sherlock's complete styling, the feeling he gave Sherlock was just 2 words, uncomfortable. They were both formal suits, but the comfort of Sherlock's suit and his wizard vest was completely incomparable. You have to know that Sherlock's wizard vest was made of metal. Sherlock really couldn't understand why clothes made of cloth were so much more comfortable than clothes that were not made of metal. The most important thing was that until now, Sherlock had always stood in a standard military posture and had never sat down once. Not only Sherlock, but even Tony himself was like this. The reason for the 2 standing there as punishment was simple. Tony explained that, before Pepper saw them, if their clothes had even a single wrinkle, they would have been doomed for the rest of their lives. This naturally irritated Sherlock. After all, the big 3 hadn't participated in the lengthy preparations. As the saying goes, it's not the lack of resources that's worrying, but the inequality of resources. Sherlock felt a bit uneasy. But soon, Sherlock spotted the big 3, who had been missing all day. Odin and Frigga, not to mention, were both wearing traditional Asgardian attire. However, compared to their Asgardian attire, theirs was undoubtedly more understated, even incorporating a host of rabbit cultural embellishments. Odin, in his own words, didn't want to dress like some alien nouveau riche. He preferred a more understated, luxurious, and sophisticated look. Sherlock was particularly bothered by the Ancient One's appearance. After all, he was now appearing in the public eyes of Dumbledore. Ladies and gentlemen, can you imagine what Dumbledore looked like in a suit as headmaster? It was the most formal, traditional British suit. He even had a top hat. Sherlock could have sworn that all Ancient One needed was a monocle you only see on TV and a walking stick to look like a pure Victorian aristocrat. Of course, that was fine, but what really made Sherlock uneasy was Ancient One's treatment of his hair and beard. God knows how much Rejoice must have been used to make those frizzy hair and beard look as flowing and natural as in shampoo commercials. He even tied the ends of his hair up, making it look similar to Hyuga Niji's hairstyle during his time as the 12. As for that long beard, needless to say, it was braided into a tight pigtail near his collarbone. Combined with Ancient One's clothing, the overall impression he gave was solemn and serious, yet with a hint of humor. It was amazing. Of course, even more amazing was Sherlock's feeling after seeing the makeup of those women and Quicksilver. Let's start with Quicksilver. His long hair was shrunk down to a short black bob, and even his facial hair was meticulously trimmed. He even wore gold-rimmed glasses to enhance the overall look. Combined with his already thin figure and long legs, he looked like a somewhat refined, wealthy young man. As for the rest, Sherlock was stunned to find that his two former violent girls had been transformed into truly ladylike figures by Pepper Potts and the others. It was clear from the looks of her that Pepper Potts had definitely corrected their demeanor, and now they looked like the daughters of wealthy European families. Sherlock was most surprised by the appearance of his beloved apprentice, Wanda. You know, Wanda's looks weren't exactly Sherlock's type, but after Wanda's makeover, Sherlock suddenly understood why Harry and Ron had been so transfixed by Hermione at the Goblet of Fireball. It was simply because Wanda was incredibly beautiful. And she is not just beautiful, the whole person even exudes a sense of solemnity from the inside out, and just one glance can give people a feeling of peace and prosperity. On the other hand, Wanda herself was a little surprised and a little shy when she saw her master Sherlock looking at her stupidly. It was precisely because of this little shyness that a beautiful blush appeared on Wanda's face, making Wanda look even more beautiful and charming. Of course, shyness is shyness, but Wanda did not show it. She just walked calmly to Sherlock's side and stood beside Sherlock generously. She didn't say anything, but it seemed as if she had said everything. As for what kind of little theater is going on in Wanda's heart right now, no one will probably know. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 580 The Legendary Banquet, 3. Of course, at a banquet of the highest caliber, a myriad of rules and regulations are quietly embedded in almost every aspect. Take, for example, the simple act of getting in a car. It's incredibly complex. First, as the main guests, Tony and Pepper naturally enjoyed the first car, with no one else in the car besides the driver. The second car, however, was even more complex. It held 3 people, none other than the Big Brother trio. The reason was simple. As the second most invited guests, the Big Brother trio were tasked with engaging the rabbits in discussions on culture, science, history, architecture, and more. In other words, at this banquet, Tony and Pepper were the main eventers, while the Big Brother trio provided the atmosphere, keeping the atmosphere lively. As for Sherlock and the foursome from Culture Limited, they were purely foodies. For this banquet, these 5 individuals were practically insignificant, their sole responsibility being to provide food. Of course, the 5 of them were also relaxed and happy. After all, they had come with Pepper Potts solely for the meal, and naturally, they didn't want anything else to interfere with their meal. Even so, the 5 people's car allocation was carefully considered. Sherlock led Wanda in the third car, while Quicksilver and the 2 girls took the last. The reason for this arrangement was simple. Sherlock felt uneasy about either the girls riding alone, or Quicksilver and Wanda, 2 honest children visiting the rabbits for the first time, riding alone. So, he simply arranged it this way. This way, Sherlock could take care of his good apprentice Wanda, while Quicksilver and the girls could keep an eye on each other. It was the perfect solution. With the car arrangement sorted out, Sherlock experienced for the first time in his 2 lifetimes what it felt like to legally ignore traffic lights while someone else cleared the way. It was quite a pleasant feeling, at least in a city as notorious for its traffic jams as the imperial capital. Experiencing such a traffic-free environment was truly rare. Of course, there were other things that surprised Sherlock. After all, before his time travel, Sherlock was just an ordinary, working rabbit. He'd imagined the banquet would take place in the Great Hall across from the National Museum, right? But the reality surprised Sherlock. The banquet was actually being held in a hotel called the Imperial Capital Hotel. It wasn't too far from the square, but it was the first time Sherlock had noticed it. But when the motorcade arrived, Sherlock felt a chill. The reason was simple. A red carpet had been laid out between the motorcade and the hotel entrance. It wasn't the discreet entrance he'd imagined. Most importantly, the red carpet was flanked by beautiful receptionists and numerous security guards to keep the crowds at bay. It was common knowledge that the rabbits loved to watch the action, and any rabbit was no exception. While the citizens of the imperial capital were accustomed to the occasional appearances of prominent figures at the Imperial Capital Hotel, as was the case today, it didn't stop them from wondering who these prominent figures were. So, early on, both sides of the red carpet were lined with cameras, making it look a bit like those award ceremonies in the film industry. Tony and Pepper were naturally accustomed to such scenes, and the big three were also indifferent. But Sherlock and the four members of Culture Limited were a bit confused. He just wanted to come here for a meal, but why was he treated like a celebrity? Sherlock was a little upset. However, with the delicious food in front of him, Sherlock, as a member of a large food empire, there was no reason to back down. He kept reassuring himself that this was nothing compared to getting off the plane. While reassuring himself, he and Wanda got out of the car. As soon as he got out of the car, Sherlock regretted his decision. The reason was simple: Tony's flamboyance. As a world-famous playboy and Iron Man, it had to be admitted that Tony had many fans around the world. Regardless of whether Tony's fandom stemmed from Iron Man or his collection of Playboy cover girls for all 12 months, it's undeniable that he's a true global celebrity. So, as soon as Tony got out of the car, someone recognized him, and the scene instantly transformed into something reminiscent of a celebrity on the red carpet. Sherlock and the four members of Culture Limited might not have eaten pork, but they'd at least seen pigs run. In the moment the atmosphere shifted, they automatically cast themselves into the roles of those celebrities on the red carpet. Wanda, seemingly relaxed but actually nervous, grasped Sherlock's stiff arm. Quicksilver and the two girls did the same. None of the five laughed at each other, each frantically pushing themselves forward. What was most unbearable for Sherlock was that, after his appearance, he, supposedly unknown, was instantly recognized by so many people that they started shouting his name frantically, leaving him completely bewildered. Oh my god, when did I become so famous? How come I didn't even know? At this moment, Sherlock felt as if he understood how Chen Jianbin had released countless albums without him even realizing it. In fact, just as Sherlock had imagined, Sherlock was quite famous among the rabbits. After all, as Tony's only relative, and with Tony no longer trying to hide Sherlock's existence, Sherlock had naturally been discovered by Tony's fans long ago. Most importantly, Sherlock was simply handsome, his looks perfectly suited to the rabbit's aesthetic, which contributed to his immense popularity. As for why Sherlock hadn't been recognized during his visit the day before yesterday, but was recognized today when he was standing next to Tony, the reason was simple: Eastern and Western appearances are different. In other words, face blindness. After all, if a foreign celebrity were truly present in China, without knowing it, you'd at most think they were familiar and good-looking, and wouldn't even consider them to be a foreign celebrity. But now, in this special occasion, and appearing among Tony's entourage, even someone with face blindness could instantly associate Sherlock with his identity, so it was only natural for him to burst into such enthusiasm. Fortunately, the red carpet was not very long, and although he was almost blinded by the flash, Sherlock finally entered the restaurant safely and began to look forward to the chef's delicious food that he had been looking forward to for a long time. Chapter 581: The Legendary Banquet, and Rules. These two words permeated the entire banquet. Just looking at the seating arrangements gave a glimpse into the situation. Sherlock had actually noticed that, as the main guests, Tony and Pepper were seated at the main table, surrounded by influential figures seen only on television. Well, one thing was certain: while they were still influential figures seen only on television, they were definitely different from the ones Sherlock had seen in his previous life. Only then did Sherlock feel as if he had truly traveled through time. Otherwise, the sightseeing of the past few days had almost made him forget he'd even traveled. At the second table sat a trio of influential figures. Like the main table, they were joined by numerous experts and scholars. After all, the main purpose of the trio's trip was to exchange ideas. Sherlock's table was much simpler. Sherlock and the foursome from Culture Limited totaled 5 people, far exceeding the number at the first 2 tables. Naturally, they were accompanied by members of the Rabbit group. Apparently aware that Sherlock and his group's main purpose was to eat, the rabbits were considerate enough not to have any unfamiliar guests accompany Sherlock's table. Yes, you guessed it right. The people seated at Sherlock's table were A, B, C, and D, 4 people Sherlock knew well. A, in A's words, felt that thanks to Sherlock, he could finally savor the royal chef's fare. Furthermore, with the presence of C and D, The three women at the table were perfectly caring. One could only say that Rabbit, a nation with a 5,000-year history of etiquette, was incredibly thoughtful. What? You mean you need someone to take care of you while you eat? Well, after all, Rabbit's food culture is incredibly rich. You know, it's nothing compared to the usual grilled meat and potatoes of foreign countries. Not to mention the three women, even Sherlock couldn't claim to have mastered all the Rabbit dishes. But regardless, Sherlock finally got to enjoy the delicious meal he'd longed for. You know what? Any chef who can handle a banquet is undoubtedly a real talent. Sherlock's movements were impeccably graceful, but his speed at eating was nothing short of whirlwind. It's no exaggeration to say that the food at this banquet tasted completely different from the same food you'd buy outside in the countryside, a world of difference, even. Sherlock couldn't say much else, but the boiled cabbage he ordered alone was enough to leave him stunned. The cabbage in the clear broth looked delightful enough, and most importantly, the flavor of the watery broth was beyond Sherlock's wildest dreams. Who could have imagined that a soup that should have seemed light and bland could be so rich and intense? Almost from the first sip, one could see that the ancient saying of a delicious mouthfeel was truly a true exaggeration. This was especially true for foreigners unfamiliar with Rabbit culture. For them, flavorful soup requires multiple seasonings and ingredients, often resulting in a thick, sticky mess. Just one look at that so-called cream of mushroom soup reveals their definition of soup. When they learned Sherlock had ordered boiled cabbage, they naively assumed it was just cabbage blanched in boiling water. Who could have imagined it would be such a fragrant and delicious dish? If boiled cabbage was even that bad, let alone Sherlock's Buddha jumps over the wall? After A explained the origins of the dish's name, everyone at Sherlock's table practically swallowed their tongues. Of course, aside from Sherlock's two stunning dishes, the entire banquet was also impressive. After all, this was a banquet of the highest caliber. Perhaps the only thing Sherlock wasn't happy about was the lack of support for him to unbuckle his belt and show off. Even though he couldn't actually unbuckle his belt, he still used magic to secretly unbutton several buttons just to eat more. After all, takeout wasn't an option here. Of course, Sherlock was so busy eating that he even asked A about tomorrow's itinerary. After all, tomorrow wasn't just a simple self-guided trip, but an officially arranged tour, and Sherlock was curious. A didn't hold back and told Sherlock the plan, a trip to the Forbidden City. Honestly, Sherlock wasn't surprised by this, but he wasn't exactly looking forward to it either. After all, having been a rabbit in his previous life, Sherlock had heard of the Forbidden City before. It's no exaggeration to say that even though Sherlock had never been there, he knew everything about it. Otherwise, all 9 years of compulsory education would have been for nothing. And most importantly, there were only a few treasures to see in the Forbidden City, mostly details and styles of ancient palace architecture. Honestly, after visiting the Temple of Heaven, Sherlock wasn't particularly interested in that. Honestly, the Temple of Heaven was the most impressive of all the ancient buildings in the Rabbit world. After all, no matter how powerful the Emperor was, he couldn't claim to surpass heaven. Otherwise, would he truly be the Emperor of humanity? Compared to the Temple of Heaven, the Forbidden City was merely larger in floor area and had more rooms. But thinking about the Emperor's life left Sherlock speechless. Besides his immense power, the Emperor's profession was one of rising earlier than the chickens and staying up later than the dogs, even his private life becoming a matter of just getting by. It was just as the old professor had said back at Hessian's residence, when it came to the comfort of life, the Emperor and the royal family might not have lived as comfortably as Hessian alone. Thanks to Little Pepper's urgent training, the entire banquet ran like a tight machine, with no glitches. Everyone was extremely satisfied, especially Sherlock's table, where the food was practically wiped out by the gluttons. The only surprising thing was that everyone didn't leave through the front door as they had when they came, but quietly left through the back door. The reason was simple: Tony and Sherlock's appearance had caused quite a stir, and many young boys and girls gathered at the door wanting to catch a glimpse of Tony and Sherlock's stunning looks. After Sherlock learned about this, he even boasted to A about whether he was now the dream of 900 million girls, prompting Wanda to pinch Sherlock's soft waist. The return trip wasn't much to say, but after A sent everyone back to the hotel, he felt a little uneasy looking at the newly delivered itinerary. He could only silently cross Sherlock in his heart. I definitely didn't mean to lie to you, and besides, no one has ever completely lied to you, right? Chapter 582, Only Half a Day Trip to the Forbidden City? Knowing the itinerary in advance, Sherlock was somewhat reluctant to get up the day after the banquet. After all, this trip was officially arranged, and it certainly wouldn't be as fun and exciting as if he had planned it himself. Furthermore, with such a formal itinerary, it was foreseeable that it wouldn't feature the same mix of official history and unofficial accounts as the Prince Gong mansion, so Sherlock's desire was naturally less intense. If anything truly captivated Sherlock, it would be the plaques surrounding the Forbidden City. Sherlock had long wanted to buy one to hang above his bed or in his bedroom. But what Sherlock hadn't anticipated was that even today's itinerary would hold its own surprises. After breakfast, Sherlock and his group, accompanied by a large group of influential figures, set off for the Forbidden City. It's fair to say that Sherlock's group had their share of special perks. Most notably, there was no need to queue to enter the Forbidden City, a fact that delighted Sherlock immensely. After all, there's no such thing as a peak or off-peak season for tourism in the imperial capital. Year-round, you can see queues everywhere. Despite not knowing about the lines, Sherlock had packed plenty of food and drinks. After all, Sherlock believed that the Forbidden City, not to mention the areas that weren't open yet, would be completely unsightly if you didn't spend a whole day exploring the areas that were open. Even if you did, it would still be unsightly. But Sherlock hadn't anticipated that the originally planned to spend the entire day at the Forbidden City and return tomorrow, would be completely altered. Following the official arrangements and surrounded by numerous fans, the group simply took a short stroll along the Forbidden City's central axis before being whisked away by a car. At first, Sherlock thought they were headed back to their hotel or to other arrangements, but to their surprise, the car took them directly to the imperial capital's airport. Before anyone could react, nearly everyone was loaded onto a plane, and it took off. That's right, the plane took off. It wasn't until the plane took off that Sherlock finally reacted and immediately got furious. You know, his luggage and spare clothes were still in the hotel. Okay, even if these things weren't important, just some daily necessities or ordinary clothes, he could just buy more, but what about all the souvenirs he had bought? You know, these things will never be available again after this time, and Sherlock couldn't bear to part with the souvenirs he had carefully selected. Immediately, Sherlock, who was completely furious, grabbed Tony by the collar and asked Tony to start questioning him about what he was doing. After all, the only person who could do such a thing besides Sherlock himself was Tony, a player who was equally like-minded and had no moral integrity. In the face of Sherlock's questioning, Tony just smiled indifferently and pointed to the bedroom of his own private plane before beginning to explain. Don't worry, all your luggage has been packed. As for what we're going to do? It's simple. I saw you were having so much fun, I felt unbalanced, so I contacted the rabbit officials and asked them to arrange a truly rabbit-themed itinerary. Thank you, Master Tony. Each of you is only able to experience this amazing rabbit cultural journey with me thanks to this young master. Tony's speech was excellent. And that was a fact, but everyone on the plane tacitly rolled their eyes at him. It was for no other reason than their disapproval of Tony's utter narcissism. Especially the trio of bosses. Honestly, since arriving at Sherlock's house, the off-duty trio's tempers have softened considerably. In the past, with their tempers, Tony's words, while not punishable by death, would certainly have been punishable by death. A beating would have been the least of their problems. But it's worth mentioning that while Sherlock knew the rabbits had arranged a special itinerary for everyone, not even Tony knew where it was going. As Tony put it, life itself is a huge adventure. Why focus on the destination? Enjoying the journey is the real thing. While that's true, Sherlock somehow felt like giving Tony a good beating. Of course, compared to beating Tony up, Sherlock was more concerned with his luggage and the souvenirs he'd bought. When Sherlock rushed into the back bedroom and saw his luggage, he was completely bewildered. First, the luggage itself was neatly stacked. Most importantly, it was perfectly organized, perfectly aligned and pleasing to the eye. True to the rabbit's tradition, each piece of luggage was thoughtfully labeled with a tag indicating its contents and owner. Even for those souvenirs Sherlock hadn't yet packed away and had nowhere else to put them, the rabbits generously provided Sherlock with a brand new suitcase. Most importantly, after Sherlock opened the luggage he had brought with him, he felt a pang of guilt. After 3 days, even when Sherlock arrived, no matter how neatly packed his luggage had been, it would have become messy from rummaging through things. But when Sherlock opened his own luggage, he found not only his clothes had been cleaned and ironed, but even his unworn clothes were neatly stored in a suitcase. The entire suitcase was perfectly organized. It was no exaggeration to say that every piece of clothing and every item had been packed to the highest standards of housekeeping. Seeing this, Sherlock almost thought it was a crime to disrupt such neatly organized luggage. As for the box of souvenirs, Sherlock could imagine what lay inside without even opening it. It was a model of housekeeping. Even Sherlock's suitcase was like this, let alone everyone else's. Sherlock knew one thing from the look of the box: nothing of his own would be left behind in his room. Absolutely not. This was Sherlock's inexplicable trust in the rabbits of this world, a feeling he had as a rabbit in his previous life. Of course, even though he knew nothing would be left behind, Sherlock still carefully packed his luggage into his kingdom of God. After Tony's unscrupulous surprise this time, Sherlock's trust in Tony on certain matters had been reduced to near zero. After everything was settled, Sherlock finally had the time to consider what kind of hardcore tour Tony had arranged for the rabbits. After all, Sherlock couldn't imagine a place that could better represent the core of rabbit culture than the imperial capital. However, the answer to all this soon came to light. After the plane had been flying for nearly 2 hours, Sherlock was stunned the moment he stepped out of the cabin. The reason was simple: Sherlock had never imagined that the place that the rabbits had arranged for Tony, filled with the core of rabbit culture, would be here. Chang'an. Chapter 583. Chang'an. Chang'an, the true birthplace of Han culture, has been the birthplace of Han culture since ancient times. From the Spring and Autumn period and the Warring States period all the way to the end of the Tang dynasty, it served as the capital of various dynasties. It's no exaggeration to say that even after the Tang dynasty, when Chang'an became a capital, it remained in the hands of the Han people for a long time. This has created Chang'an's unique cultural atmosphere and a sense of roots that every rabbit feels. Although Chang'an is now filled with skyscrapers and it's difficult to see any buildings from before the Ming dynasty, the feeling of being born here remains. This is the romance that belongs to every rabbit, and it's also the romance of a time-traveling rabbit like Sherlock. Although Sherlock's appearance and body don't resemble a rabbit, he has always believed that his soul is that of a legitimate rabbit, just like an iPhone with the exterior but discovers it's powered by Harmony OS upon turning on the screen. The criteria for determining whether you are a rabbit are actually very simple. It's not based on bloodline or appearance, but on whether you have a heart that identifies with rabbit culture and is willing to integrate into the cryptocurrency community. After exiting the plane, Sherlock looked at the sign Chang'an above the airport and was overcome with emotion. He even began to regret not having come to this magical land sooner. It was strange to think that Chang'an was like the village keeper, usually obscure and barely noticeable, barely remembered by those away for work. But whenever you return home and see the keeper grinning at you at the village entrance, you know you've arrived home. As the saying goes, as long as Chang'an exists, rabbit culture will never fade, it will only grow ever larger and more vibrant. Thankfully, Sherlock's feelings faded quickly transforming into curiosity about this ancient capital of 6 dynasties, the very heart of China. Unfortunately, because this trip was a last-minute one, Sherlock's familiar friends, A, B, C, and D, did not come with the group, but were replaced by the local reception team. The same familiar 4-person setup, the same familiar 2-man, 2-woman setup, but compared to A, B, C, and D's code names, these 4 were undoubtedly far more sophisticated. Their code names were Z, Zhou, Yin, and Mao. Chang'an, the ancient capital of the 6 dynasties and the cultural heartland, was truly worthy of its name. Just look at their code names, the 12 heavenly stems. I wonder if that burly, bodybuilder-looking, ugly guy had any issues with his code name. Of course, this was all just Sherlock's own little drama. After all, Sherlock and his group were invited guests, so proper etiquette was expected. They didn't even have to leave the airport. After disembarking, they boarded the bus arranged by the reception desk and headed out. Along the way, Z, Zhou, Yin, Mao, and S, like A, B, C, and D, took on the responsibility of explaining things. It's fair to say that when it comes to cultural heritage and depth, the imperial capital simply can't compare to Chang'an. Just listening to Mao's introduction to Chang'an was enough to make that clear. While Chang'an is now a modern metropolis, it's difficult to find any buildings reminiscent of its former 6 dynasties capital. This doesn't diminish the local sense of pride. This sense of pride permeates every aspect of life. For example, Mao's explanation filled Sherlock with emotion, and he even began to imagine his itinerary in Chang'an. After all, Chang'an boasts a vast array of treasures, with excavations dating back to the Neolithic Age and the Ming and Qing dynasties, encompassing everything. After all, this area has been a Han Chinese territory since ancient times. Even now, it's hard to say whether the population above ground or below ground is more numerous. Of course, the most renowned artifacts are the cultural relics. While I can't say much about other things, just in terms of the number of bronze artifacts, it's hard to say whether the National Museum of China or the renowned Shaanxi Museum has more. Compared to the imperial capital, Chang'an boasts 2 archaeological teams, an official, staff team and the Chang'an Metro Construction Team, known as the Chang'an Archaeological Team II. With Mao's guidance, Sherlock learned the details of his itinerary. Just like in the imperial capital, the next day's itinerary was planned that evening. After all, everyone present was so busy, who knew what might suddenly arise tomorrow. However, to better familiarize everyone with Chang'an, the rabbit officials arranged a so-called presidential line tour to complete the first day's tour. It might sound magical, but it was actually quite simple. In the morning, we'd visit Chang'an's most famous terracotta warriors and horses museum to see the collection of figures of the world's foremost figure collector, our fascinating ancestor Qin Shi Huang. In the afternoon, we'd visit Tuoqing Hot Springs, the former bathhouse of Yang Guifei and Emperor Li Shimin. In the evening, we'd watch the large-scale outdoor performance of Song of Everlasting Regret at Tuoqing Hot Springs, which had been famous even before Sherlock's time travel. Everyone was happy with the itinerary, even Sherlock. It might be said that Sherlock, a Tang Dynasty fan before his time travel, was actually quite interested in Li Shimin's bathhouse. Of course, these were all for tomorrow. Today, as it was almost evening, no plans were made for everyone. But after all, Chang'an was a land of treasures, and even without a plan, no one present had any desire to wander around. The reason was simple: today's destination was a high-end sanatorium at the foot of Mount Li. You see, it's famous for its hot springs. That's right, the same hot springs that flow from the Huiqing pool, bathed by everyone from Qin Shi Huang to Yang Guifei. This news sent the entire train car abuzz. Ever since Sherlock had brought the Asgardian bathhouse here, Sherlock's bathroom had become the most popular amenity in the entire training ground, bar none. Honestly, this trip had been a mix of play and work, leaving everyone exhausted and missing the steaming hot bathhouse back home. Now you're telling them they can enjoy the hot springs, and the water's quality is so high it rivals the legendary water in top-tier cosmetics. It's a wonder everyone isn't excited. The crowd in the train car had automatically divided by gender. The men began discussing what kind of tea they drink while bathing, while the women discussed what kind of facial masks and other skincare products they'd use. Mao's lips moved, but he swallowed his words about private bathing pools that could be used to care for those in need, and fell into deep self-doubt. What was going on in the capital? Why did it feel like I wasn't hosting some foreigners this time, but a bunch of old friends from Northeast China? My goodness, every single one of these people knew more about bathing culture than I did. When did Northeastern bathing culture become so popular that it went global? How come I didn't know anything about it, and no one told me? Oh no, could my internet be down? Chapter 584, Hot Spring Water of Huiqing Pool. After nearly 2 hours, the bus finally arrived at the sanatorium at the foot of Mount Li in Chang'an before sunset. Sherlock even checked the map. Honestly, it wasn't far from the Huiqing Palace. What surprised Sherlock the most was that this high-end sanatorium even had an open-air bath. Best of all, this open-air bath was an antique-style bath, filled with running water. Half of the hot spring pool was inside a pavilion, and half was outside. And, most importantly, there was a stone lounge chair in the water in the outer part. Sherlock couldn't imagine how comfortable it would be to soak there. What, a small pool in the room? Haha, even dogs wouldn't soak in that. How could a small pool compare to the fragrance of the one outside? Who could resist the joy of soaking in a hot spring, sipping tea, and chatting while gazing at the stars? Sherlock couldn't resist it. Therefore, after Sherlock arrived at his room, he simply went to the toilet, opened a portal, went back home to get some bathing equipment and tea sets, and then went straight to the bathing pool he had long been eyeing. Facts have proved that no matter how fast Sherlock is, there will always be someone who is one step faster than Sherlock. By the time Sherlock reached the edge of the pool, Tony and the Odins had already soaked in the pool. You must know that the hot spring water of Huiqing Pool itself is not ordinary hot spring water. This hot spring water maintains a temperature of 43 degrees all year round, and it contains many various elements. In particular, the iron ions in it make the entire hot spring water appear a beautiful light green. In addition, the specifications of this sanatorium are high enough. It can be said that it completely restores the medicinal soup that Emperor Taizong of Tang, Li Shimin, used when he took a hot spring bath. Many precious Chinese herbs were added to it. According to legend, the two pools were divided by gender. The male pool recreates the medicinal herbs used by Emperor Li Shimin during his time, known for their yang tonifying, invigorating, and vital energy, while the female pool recreates yang Ifei's medicinal baths, known for their beauty and nourishing yin and yang. The moment Sherlock entered the pool, he couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. This truly was unlike ordinary hot spring water. After all, it was said that these waters could even produce Lanshan jade, naturally, a truly marvelous sight. After Sherlock warmed up completely, he finally had the heart to inquire about the others' whereabouts. Yes, it was Quicksilver. Quicksilver, logically speaking, should be the fastest being, so why hadn't he appeared yet? It would have been better if he hadn't asked. Instead, Tony and Odin burst into laughter, unleashing merciless taunts at Quicksilver. The reason Quicksilver hadn't come, opting instead for a solo bath in the small pool inside the room, the kind not even dogs use, was simple: he was shy. This made Sherlock a little confused. Logically, Quicksilver shouldn't be shy. After arriving at Sherlock's training ground, both Quicksilver and Wanda should have been accustomed to Sherlock's most popular bathhouse. Even Quicksilver, when Sherlock was training, would take a bath every night before going to bed to relieve the fatigue of running all day. How could he be shy? After asking carefully, Sherlock finally understood the specific reason and sighed that bitches are just pretentious. The reason for Quicksilver's shyness was simple. This place was open air. Quicksilver couldn't stand taking a bath in an open-air hot spring with his butt naked. In Quicksilver's words, this was no different from being a pervert. Of course, such statements had already been taught by Odin and Tony, so Sherlock naturally forgave Quicksilver for calling him a pervert. But based on their descriptions, Sherlock just hoped that this hot spring water could speed up the healing of injuries. What, you mean Ancient One? Of course, the Ancient One would go to the female side. Despite his Dumbledore appearance, he was still a woman at heart, so naturally, he would go to the female side. As for how to get there, that was simple. He could just return to his room and untransform, then create a portal and soak in the bath without anyone noticing. Back at Sherlock's side, knowing Quicksilver wouldn't be coming, he didn't wait for the shy young man and directly retrieved the tea set he had prepared from his divine kingdom. With a little magic, not even a wand needed, Sherlock made the entire tea tray float on the surface of the hot springs. As for the water source, since they were at the working pool, it was natural to use hot spring water. Using magic, Sherlock diverted a pot of clean hot spring water from the source, then conjured a fireball in his hand to boil the water. He then began brewing the poor tea they had all agreed on. Of course, since they had all agreed on this, Sherlock also opened a palm-sized portal and offered a cup to poor Quicksilver. As the fragrance of tea wafted through the hot spring, blending with the subtle aroma of Chinese medicinal herbs, the three men sighed in delight after taking a sip, then reclined on the lounge chairs within. Gazing at the stars, each of them couldn't help but sigh in admiration. A day like this truly lived up to the saying, even the Emperor can't match me. Crucially, Sherlock's magic wasn't just for tea. With their minds wandering, they even enjoyed a meal of Chang'an-style mutton soup buns right in the hot spring. How he did it was simple. There was a kid who hadn't joined them, and he was incredibly fast. Couldn't they just ask him to act as a delivery driver? Quicksilver was truly resourceful. Sherlock simply searched online for the most authentic Palmo, stir-fried buns, gave Quicksilver a location and a menu, and in less than half an hour, he appeared before the three, speechless, clutching 3 boxes of Palmo. Who could possibly understand the joy of eating, drinking tea, and soaking in a hot spring? Sherlock felt like he had no regrets in his life. Besides, the steamed buns tasted truly delicious. If Sherlock had to describe it, it would probably be something like tang, a type of soup. The three of them began to relax more and more, their conversation shifting from rabbit culture to world culture, then from world culture to cosmic culture, and finally from cosmic culture to gossip. Finally, each of them sharing the dark histories of those around them. Of course, Chang'an's surprises weren't over yet. As they soaked in the comfort of the hot springs, Mount Lee, not far away, suddenly lit up. Countless blue lights, like starlight, framed the entire mountain. The dreamlike scene left the three people in the hot springs speechless. The scenery at that moment left them speechless. Only two simple, straightforward words could describe what they saw: beautiful. Chapter 585, Terracotta Warriors Tour. After a night of rest, Sherlock and the others immediately went to Yin to inquire about the light that had outlined the entire mountain last night. After all, with the exception of Quicksilver, who was bathing in his room and occasionally making a cameo appearance as a speedy delivery driver, almost everyone else had seen the sight. The answer was simple: it was a set for the evening's performance of Song of Everlasting Regret. Everyone in the car was stunned. They had never imagined that a rabbit could go so crazy as to transform the entire mountain into a musical. Even after hearing this answer, everyone was eagerly anticipating tonight's performance of Song of Everlasting Regret. Of course, since it was an evening show, they still had to go on their daytime itinerary. After all, everyone was eagerly anticipating the Terracotta Warriors. Sherlock, in particular, knew about the Terracotta Warriors, but most had only seen them in textbooks. Seeing them in person was a first in his 2 lifetimes, and Sherlock swore it was his first time in his 2 lifetimes, so he was filled with anticipation for the journey. Sherlock's expectations proved to be spot on. The entire Terracotta Warriors Museum encompasses a vast expanse, far more than the mere pits depicted in textbooks. A vast garden surrounds the pits. Upon arrival, Yin, and Mao provided a guided tour to ensure everyone fully understood the details of the Terracotta Army. Honestly, seeing the burial objects of Qin Shi Huang, the greatest emperor of all time, is truly awe-inspiring. While people often joke that our charming ancestor Qin Shi Huang was the first and largest collector of figurines in our country's history, the first impression upon actually stepping into Pit 1 is anything but joking. The first thing anyone who sees the Terracotta Warriors experiences isn't sheer grandeur or awe at the wonders of this world, but rather a captivating, menacing aura. Yes, you read that correctly, murderous aura. Although the Terracotta Warriors' bodies have lost their color, and even their weapons and chariots have been eroded by time, you can still feel the overwhelming murderous aura of the Qin soldiers. The entire Terracotta army is arranged to resemble the marching formations of the Qin army during battle. At the front are the advance guard, the so-called cannon fodder composed of slaves and prisoners of war. Behind them lie the real troops, clad in armor and with resolute gazes. Flanking guards face the sides to prevent enemy attacks from either side, and in the rear are the chariots, known as chariots, formed by war horses. It's worth noting that if you look closely, you'll notice that nearly all of the Terracotta Warriors have their hair tied on the right side. According to the tour guide, the Qin army likely used this hair to determine the army's status. A hair bun tied on the right side signified preparations for battle or the arrival of a battlefield, while a bun tied on the left signified rest. Just looking at the hair buns on the Terracotta Warriors revealed the Emperor's intentions. This wasn't about passing away, nor was it about a passing away. It was about ensuring that future generations would not suffer in the underworld, and that they would lay a lasting legacy for their descendants even in the underworld. Even more astonishing was the fact that each of the Terracotta Warriors looked completely different. No two were exactly alike, as they were all constructed to resemble living people. Even the soil used to bury the warriors was a precious, Class III cultural relic. You might be wondering, isn't it just some ordinary-looking loess? How could it be considered a cultural relic? That's exactly what Sherlock thought. It wasn't until the guide revealed the truth that he finally understood why the Terracotta Warriors were considered such a miracle. The soil used to bury the warriors was cooked in a wok. The intense heat killed off bacteria and plants, ensuring that even after millennia, Qin Shi Huang's Terracotta Warriors remained impervious to plant and insect damage. This smelted clay is also essential for restoring the Terracotta Warriors. Finding soil from the Qin dynasty to restore the warriors to their original form is incredibly difficult. Of course, this alone is merely a monumental undertaking, far from a miracle. The true miracle lies in the firing of the Terracotta Warriors. The Terracotta Warriors are, to be honest, pottery, made from clay calcined by flame. Setting aside the question of how the ancients managed to fire these massive figures, each approximately 1.8 meters tall, in a single firing, the firing process itself remains largely unsolved, even today. Sherlock doesn't fully understand this, having only heard a general idea that pottery begins to transform into porcelain at a certain point. However, according to expert research, the temperatures at which the terracotta warriors were fired far exceeded the point at which pottery transforms into porcelain, yet the warriors remain pottery and don't transform below this temperature. It's truly remarkable. And most crucially, the height of the terracotta warriors. You should know that ancient people were usually short due to malnutrition and other reasons. This was caused by the environment at the time. After all, the living environment at that time meant that people were considered wealthy if they could have enough food. However, among the terracotta warriors and horses buried with the Qin Shi Huang mausoleum, no one was less than 1.8 meters tall. In the words of the tour guide, these people were basically selected from all over the country, with standards similar to those of today's honor guards. In fact, because of their height, they were Qin Shi Huang's personal guards and the most powerful army at the time. No one thinks there is anything wrong with this. After all, modern fighting is based on weight. For these 1.8 meter tall Qin men, it is not difficult to beat up ordinary people of shorter height. The entire Qin Shi Huang terracotta army consists of only 3 pits. Pit 1 is the one that everyone often sees in books. It is the tunnel with countless terracotta warriors and horses. It is also the place that netizens joked about, saying that after more than 1,000 years of death, it can still provide jobs for future generations for more than 900 years. Pit number 2, however, has not been deeply excavated. The reason is simple: preservation. After all, the terracotta warriors, when unearthed, were vibrantly colored, completely different from the clay figures we see today. Without the necessary technology to fully preserve the terracotta army, Rabbit has decided not to excavate further. Of course, this doesn't mean pit number 2 is without its attractions. Its main hall houses the most perfectly preserved terracotta warrior to date, including the kneeling figure that bears a striking resemblance to Dong Yuhu and the general figure often featured in textbooks. The tour guide also explained how to distinguish the status of the figures within the terracotta army, which was quite fascinating. Pit number 3, on the other hand, resembles a command room. While modest in scale, it holds immense importance, serving as the heart and soul of the entire terracotta army. According to ancient theory, this was the headquarters of this massive combat unit. According to the young lady, there is actually a pit number 4, but there is nothing in it. The reason is very simple. Before the construction of pit number 4 was completed, Qin Shi Huang himself had already passed away. As a result, the entire pit number 4 is only a small prototype, and even the soil has not been heated. In the words of the young lady, this is already the earliest unfinished project in recorded history. Chapter 586, Imperial Seal. Of course, since they were already here, the young lady also recommended Lanshan Jade, a precious mineral found only in Mount Li. After last night's hot springs experience, everyone was very interested in this Lanshan Jade, mined from the very source of the hot springs. Lanshan Jade isn't particularly beautiful. It's a white ivory-like material, and the finer the quality, the more similar it is to ivory. In a true comparison, many other jades from Rabbit are more beautiful than Lanshan Jade, but when it comes down to it, Lanshan Jade is the most nourishing. As the saying goes, a person nurtures jade for 3 years, jade nurtures a person for a lifetime. This holds true for Lanshan Jade. Of course, anything with the word jade in it is bound to be expensive, but since everyone present is affluent, they naturally won't be stingy. Sherlock even bought 2 jade bracelets for his apprentice, Wanda, one on each hand. Just imagining Scarlet Witch wearing 2 ivory white jade bracelets on each hand filled Sherlock's heart with joy. Furthermore, Sherlock had secretly tested it with magic and was surprised to discover that it actually had the ability to amplify and control a magic, making it all the more imperative for his apprentice. Of course, Sherlock wasn't stingy with the rest of the group either, buying bracelets for each of the 2 girls and a neck-hanging plaque for Quicksilver, his half-apprentice, who was determined to quit the Avengers and study hard for college. As for Sherlock himself, you might not believe it, but the moment he entered the room, he immediately took a fancy to an item, a modern replica of the Imperial Seal made from Lanshan Jade. The allure of the words "mandate from heaven, long live and prosper" was irresistible to any man, not even Sherlock, who had traveled through time. Just say you came across such a good thing, how could I resist? I immediately paid for it, even though it was a modern artifact. After all, it was made of the same material as the real Imperial Seal. So, rounding it off, I could be considered the owner of the Imperial Seal. Take it from me. Of course, the Lanshan jade that could be carved into the imperial seal was certainly worth a fortune. You'd think Shylock's bank account balance wouldn't even cover it. Luckily, while he was out of cash, Shylock still had gold. Thus began the most bizarre purchase since the Terracotta Warriors Museum opened. A foreigner, constantly clamoring for Your Majesty, pulled out a large lump of gold and demanded to buy the replica of the Lanshan jade imperial seal at the gate. If it were any other foreigner, Shylock's constant barrage of Your Majesty would have gotten him kicked out. But Shylock's status was crucial, and after a series of negotiations, Shylock successfully exchanged an equal amount of gold for the replica of the Lanshan jade imperial seal. Of course, this wasn't the end of the story. As someone with a deep understanding of history, how could Sherlock not know that the real imperial seal wasn't as flawless as it was now? He immediately borrowed the jade shop's workshop and then, after pulling out a piece of gold, performed a series of handicrafts. As history tells it, after replacing one corner with gold, Sherlock, amidst the crowd's disdain, laughed uncontrollably, even boasting, "Even if I die tomorrow, it would be a death by the Emperor." Of course, such a thing might seem contemptuous to the public. But to the surrounding idiots, it was incredibly amusing. Who could have imagined that a foreigner could know so many anecdotes about the imperial seal? They inevitably developed a certain affinity for this witty foreigner. Some of the more naive tourists even joined in Sherlock's sitcom performance, with some chanting "Long live the Emperor" and others pretending to assassinate and steal the seal. The atmosphere was filled with laughter and joy. After a long period of playfulness, everyone finally exited the Terracotta Warriors Museum. Only when Sherlock got into the car did the ministers following him depart amidst laughter. After all, Sherlock had held the imperial seal high throughout the entire trip, naturally prompting some skeptical people to play along. It was the four of them, Z, Joe, Yin, and Mao, and the group accompanying Sherlock, who felt unusually socially awkward. Tony, in particular, hadn't shown a single bit of face since Sherlock's antics began. It was truly embarrassing. Even the four of them were somewhat impressed. They had hosted many VIPs, but they were the first to see someone as playful and knowledgeable as Sherlock, understanding the culture and memes of the rabbits. Of course, he was the first VIP to be so shrewd. After all, let alone those VIPs, even ordinary people wouldn't do something like Sherlock, insisting on buying the imperial seal and then calling him Iron Guardian all the time. He even managed to pull off a stunt like, "My dear ministers, disperse," right before getting on the bus. Most importantly, there were actually some people willing to play along with him. Amidst the laughter and cheers, someone even shouted, "Long live the Emperor! I'm leaving now, but this time I'm leaving for life." It was truly magical. But Sherlock truly treasured the imperial seal he'd purchased. After getting on the bus, he slipped it into his kingdom without anyone noticing. Sherlock had even decided to keep it as his personal seal from now on. Amidst the laughter and cheers, Zhou Yin Mao led everyone to a restaurant with distinct Chang'an characteristics, not open to the public, where they savored a delicious meal. Then, they set off towards Huaking Palace. Although Huaking Palace is famous, it's actually not that much to see. After all, they had already experienced the most famous hot springs yesterday. Only some of the former pools remain for visitors to visit, including the most famous Furin Pool, where Yang Yifei bathed. However, it no longer has the former luxury, and all that remains is an ordinary earthen pit with a decorative design. However, there is a saying that it is necessary to increase knowledge. For example, at Huaking Palace, Sherlock finally understood that the so-called bathing in the Emperor's grace was not a bathing in the artistic sense, but a bathing in the physical sense. Simply put, during the reign of Emperor Li Shimin, the water in the bathing pools of Huaking Palace was connected. The water closest to the spring was the Erfang Pool. The Erfang bathing water would flow through pipes and excavated tunnels to the pools of ministers and princes. This is the so-called bathing in the Emperor's grace, and it really is a bathing in the Emperor's grace in the physical sense. Aside from that, the most famous event here is probably the Chang'an incident, where Chiang Kai-shek was held hostage by the young marshal and Yang Hucheng, marking the beginning of the Kuomintang communist anti-Japanese uprising. Even Chiang Kai-shek's bedroom and the rock crevice where he hid are still here. It's quite remarkable that even Shylock, a veteran of military training, took over half an hour to walk from Chiang Kai-shek's bedroom to that crevice. How on earth did Chiang Kai-shek manage to get there in just 15 minutes? To better understand the truth, the crowd also watched an interactive stage play depicting the events of that time. Chiang Kai-shek was truly inhuman. With the enemy at hand, you're not coherent in your external defense, and you're still trying to sell the idea of pacifying the country before resisting foreign aggression? What a dirk. The entire Hooking Palace tour was much simpler than the Terracotta Army tour this morning, as the two areas are incomparable. But that doesn't mean there's nothing left to do at Hooking Palace. You'll know that even today, the palace still has its hot springs open to the public, akin to the pleasures of the wealthy and powerful, now accessible to ordinary people. Of course, prices vary, but after all, there's the world's richest man among the team. Tony immediately waved his hand and declared, "Soak. Soak in the best. Today, Tony, will experience what it was like to be in Yangifi's fragrant pool." If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 587 Yangifi's Bath. Facts proved that even though Tony was the world's richest man and had seen countless spectacular events, he didn't know everything. Even having a Sherlock Holmes who'd been a rabbit in his previous life wouldn't have helped. The reason for his sentimental expression was simple. Tony had just waved his hand, promising to experience what it was like to soak in the Xiangning pool, just like Yangifi had done back then. After all, Tony wasn't short of money, and his trip to Hooking Palace had ended earlier than expected, so Zhou Yinmao didn't say much. Most importantly, Tony hadn't forgotten about them and bought tickets for them as well. The staff at the Xiangning pool had probably never seen a player as extravagant as Tony, so they happily agreed. However, what everyone didn't expect was that since they'd paid at Hooking Palace, that meant the bathing location should be there. But what everyone didn't expect was that after collecting their money, the staff member beamed and led the way, explaining as they went. It turned out that the building with a plaque for the Xiangning pool inside the Hooking Palace wasn't actually the actual location of the pool. That building was for tourists to soak their feet, and most of the time it was just a foot bath. The real replica of the Xiangning pool wasn't actually inside the Hooking Palace. Following the staff through a small gate, they arrived at a public hot spring hotel. Before anyone could say anything, the staff member led them through the lobby and toward the back. It wasn't long before they were outside a building. Only then did the staff begin explaining. This was the location of the replica Xiangning pool. Although it belonged to the hotel, it wasn't a public bathhouse as everyone imagined, but rather a ticketed facility. Only those who purchased a ticket could enter this life-size replica of Yangifi's Xiangning pool. Of course, as a former imperial bath, its interior decoration was naturally of immense value, making mass production impossible. Therefore, the entire Xiangning pool adopted a mixed bathing system, in swimsuits, of course. After the staff's detailed explanation, Sherlock and the others remained silent. After all, given the price, the service at the Xiangning pool was naturally excellent. Upon learning that everyone would be attending the first performance of the Song of Everlasting Regret that evening, the staff immediately promised to remind everyone and escort them to the venue. The service within the bathhouse was also excellent, with tea, beverages, and snacks provided throughout the evening. Everyone was delighted with the staff's explanation, save for Zhou, Yin, and Mao. They actually wanted to tell everyone that they had already arranged dinner and could go out for dinner and then return to watch the first performance of the Song of Everlasting Regret. However, seeing the excitement among the group, Zhou, Yin, and Mao remained silent, silently following the others to the changing rooms to change into their swimsuits. After changing, Tony, a seasoned traveler, was stunned upon entering the fragrant pool. Unlike the earthen pit he had just seen, the restored Begonia hot spring was truly exquisite. The entire pool, approximately 60 square meters in size, was filled with calf-deep hot spring water. Pink Lanchan jade of varying sizes was meticulously arranged throughout the pool. In the center, a one replica of the hibiscus pool, a familiar sight. Upon entering the pool, even the most reluctant admirers were captivated by the ancient wisdom. If you walk to the deepest part of the pool, the hibiscus pool, you'll be surprised to find the water is just enough to reach the shoulders of a person about 1.7 meters tall. If you prefer to sit down, you can do so on the second level. Once you sit down, you'll be amazed to find the water reaches just below your neck, allowing you to fully immerse yourself in the hot spring. The most crucial element was the hot spring water that filled the entire room. These calf-deep pools weren't just for show, They were truly practical. The temperature of these shallow waters was lower than that of the water in the hibiscus pool. And because of their depth, they could easily lie down in the shallow pool with just a rock or a piece of wood. In other words, these surface waters, with their lower temperature limits, were for those tired of soaking in the deep pool to rest in. Of course, the most crucial element was the secret medicine package Yang Giffey used during her baths. Sherlock even learned about it. It consisted of ingredients like scilor, schizonopita, angelica root, soap barrett, fennel, patchouli, angelica root, ligusticum wallichii, angelica root, ligusticum chuangshan, safflower root, jasmine flower, and osmanthus flower, all ground into powder and then boiled into decoction to be mixed into the hot springs. The above Chinese medicine isn't fabricated by the author, it's a real recipe inscribed on the wall of Huiking Palace. You can try it. Legend has it that it can eliminate all unpleasant odors, and its fragrance lingers for a day. It also makes the skin smooth and delicate. There's also a body lotion made from human milk, elephant essence, white honey, and lotus root juice. After using it, your skin becomes even softer, smoother, and more fragrant, as if it were cotton. You're right, Sherlock did smell a strange fragrance as he approached this so-called fragrant pool. The wisdom of the ancients is truly remarkable. And don't underestimate Chinese medicine. Remember, during his 7 years of training and magical studies, Sherlock even researched Chinese medicine because potions were so similar to Chinese medicine. Do you know the conclusion? It's simple. The only difference between Chinese medicine and potions is the addition of magical ingredients. Lacking magical power, the ancient rabbits found substitutes for these ingredients in the Muggle world. While the effects are much slower than potions, the results are no less effective. Anyone who's used Yunnan Bei Iao or Liaoshen Wan will undoubtedly understand this. To Sherlock, these things are practically magic potions. All of this to say is simply to emphasize one point: this Yang Giffey-style hot spring, infused with medicinal herbs, is indeed infinitely superior to ordinary hot springs. At least everyone present felt that way. Even Z, Zhou, Yin, and Mao were no exception. Although they never joined the crowd in soaking in the deep pool, remaining together in the shallow corner, this didn't prevent them from experiencing Yang Giffey's former luxury. Putting aside the value of the pink jade covering the entire room, the traditional Chinese medicine alone was undoubtedly valuable. After all, for such a large pool to be filled with medicinal properties, the amount of medicinal herbs required would be astronomical. Of course, these things had little to do with Sherlock, Tony, and the others. Sherlock, in particular, felt like he was experiencing the same feeling as Yang Giffey. Just for fun, he performed a scene for everyone, a beauty emerging from the bath. While the bathing scene was visible, the beauty wasn't, which was a bit eye-catching. Chapter 588 Song of Everlasting Regret. Following the staff's footsteps, Sherlock and the others once again passed through the small door that had become pitch black due to the darkening sky, and arrived at the VIP seats that Zizhou Yin Mao had already arranged for everyone. At this time, the appearance of Huiking Palace had changed a lot. You must know that the entire performance of Song of Everlasting Regret was held in Huiking Palace. During the day, it was a tourist attraction with a large flow of people, so naturally, the performance venue would not restrict tourists' enjoyment. Therefore, the entire performance venue of Song of Everlasting Regret was hidden during the day. The stage was hidden under the water of an artificial lake, and the seats for the audience were hidden under the ground. Before the performance began, professional staff would raise the stage from the water and the audience seats from the ground. Just this investment alone could let Sherlock know that it was not a small amount. Before crossing over, Sherlock worked as a stage light for a while before graduating from university and becoming a real social animal. As a semi-professional in the industry, Sherlock knew exactly how outrageous these water-resistant stage props and lighting were. After all, water and fire are forbidden on ordinary stages, and Song of Everlasting Regret embraced both. There's no such thing as the most outrageous, only the most outrageous. And how could Sherlock describe the entire performance of Song of Everlasting Regret? If he had to describe it, there would be only two words: stunning. From the lighting to the choreography to the actors' performances, the single most striking word was shocking. Whether it was the entire Mount Lee as a backdrop or the actors soaring across the stage, every moment was awe-inspiring. Sherlock's only regret was that, due to the clear skies today, the performance wasn't at its peak of beautiful aesthetics. After all, from his previous life, influenced by a certain music video, Sherlock knew that Song of Everlasting Regret was performed outdoors, so whenever it snowed or rained, it would instantly become a nationally renowned beautiful aesthetic. The so-called endless hatred of hatred and longing will, with divine intervention, become an unforgettable experience. Even the actors themselves are fortunate to be able to participate in such a performance. Of course, Song of Everlasting Regret is a dialogue-free stage play, so while its aesthetics are truly exceptional, its appeal to younger audiences is limited. For example, the two young girls, spent the entire performance admiring the exaggerated and impressive choreography. As for the content of the performance, honestly, they didn't understand it at all. Even Wanda and Quicksilver were completely bewildered. Consequently, the four members of Culture Limited kept asking Sherlock what the performance meant, which made Sherlock feel a bit uneasy. How did you expect Sherlock to explain it? Tell everyone that the Song of Everlasting Regret is essentially a story of love, hate, and resentment between a father-in-law and his daughter-in-law? Damn. Sherlock couldn't bring himself to say that. After all, the true historical fact is that Yang Gifei was originally a prince's consort, chosen by the emperor and forced to marry him. Crucially, while the two claimed to be deeply in love, the age difference between them was actually quite different. This explanation truly stumped Sherlock. It left Sherlock agonizing over the show, marveling at the stunning choreography of the entire Song of Everlasting Regret, and astounded by Rabbit's interpretation of top-notch B aesthetics. He racked his brains to explain it to the four of them while maintaining the three perspectives of the limited cultural quartet. Seeing Sherlock's near suffocation, everyone present who understood the Song of Everlasting Regret had a look of anticipation. Speaking of which, while Sherlock's performance couldn't compare to the Song of Everlasting Regret in terms of choreography, when it came to excitement, everyone agreed that Sherlock's performance was no less impressive than the current Song of Everlasting Regret. Fortunately, the entire Song of Everlasting Sorrow performance lasted just over an hour. Sherlock even swore that if it had lasted any longer, only one of Hooking Palace and Sherlock would have remained today. Of course, this was all joking. Regardless, the performance was truly breathtaking, especially after learning about the historical facts of the time. You'll be amazed at the Chinese people's interpretation of beauty. Sherlock highly recommends everyone to see it. After the performance, it was already past 7 p.m., and the sky had completely darkened. Logically, everyone should have gone back to the hotel to rest. After all, they'd been enjoying the whole day. But there were always those who had other ideas, like Sherlock. For Sherlock, having come to Chang'an, a city known for never sleeping, how could he simply go back and rest? After all, after nightfall, that's how Chang'an truly opens up. And most importantly, Sherlock had even decided where to go. That's right, Sherlock was headed to the place known as the Cyber Tang Dynasty Suzaku Street, the Tang Dynasty city that never sleeps. However, it was obvious that the three big guys were not that interested in the Tang Dynasty city that never sleeps. Compared to the bustling night market, the three big guys wanted to go back to soak in the hot springs, drink some tea, and rest. And with ideas, there will naturally be differences, so the two groups naturally split into two groups. Among them, Zhou Mao, a man and a woman, decided to follow the three big guys back to the hotel, while the remaining two people, Zi Yin, followed the rest of the group to the Tang Dynasty city that never sleeps. Fortunately, just in case, Zi, Zhou, Yin, and Mao listened to the advice of Jia, Yi, Bing, and Ding from the imperial capital at the beginning of the mission and prepared an extra car as a backup vehicle, otherwise Sherlock's sudden idea would cause a lot of trouble. But what Zi and Yin didn't expect was that Sherlock's tricks were far from over. Chapter 589, Foreign Royals in the Tang Dynasty's Nightless City, Part 1. After all, we've arrived in Chang'an, and we've made our way to the Cyber Tang Dynasty Suzaku Street, the ever-sleeping city of the Tang Dynasty. No matter what, we have to get our hands on a set of legendary Hanfu, right? Sherlock had longed for it before crossing over, but unfortunately, his previous life's physique and good looks haven't been enough to support his ambition. Hanfu is incredibly dependent on appearance. As the saying goes, a good-looking man wearing Hanfu is a lord, ready to marry, while an unattractive man wearing it is a wealthy man, destined to work like a slave in his next life. Fortunately, after crossing over, Sherlock's looks have improved dramatically. Not to mention Panin's looks, he's at least on par with the likes of Daniel Wu and Eddie Peng. The only problem is that, because of his foreign appearance in this life, it's almost certain that even Sherlock would look a bit awkward in Hanfu, like Alibaba in the Dali Temple. Of course, we can only truly judge this after we try it on. As it happens, while there aren't many other things to buy in Chang'an, Hanfu photoshoots are everywhere. Apparently, Tony, a bit of a germaphobe, wasn't satisfied with simply renting Hanfu. He simply waved his hand and ordered Ziyan to take them to buy a set of the finest Hanfu. It's true, Hanfu is a bottomless pit. He'd buy a set for 3 to 500 yuan, 3 to 5,000 yuan, even 3 to 5,000 yuan, and even 3 to 5,000 yuan. The most outrageous prices even reached 3 to 5 million yuan. Most importantly, the styles and designs of these sets were exactly the same. How could you argue with that? Of course, since they were just sightseeing, not collecting, there was no need to focus on the 3 to 5 million yuan for a high-end Hanfu with Suzhou embroidery and brocade. So Tony simply ordered everyone a set for 3 to 5,000 yuan. He even included Ziyan and the other two. Although everyone had a set of Hanfu, the specifications and types were different. Take Ziyan and Yin for example. For some reason, Tony, for some ill-intentioned reason, gifted them a set of authentic Tang Dynasty Mingguang armor, a full set weighing 30 to 50 kilograms. Even though the armor was significantly more expensive, Tony insisted on going ahead, even giving them a proper Tang Dynasty sword, albeit an unsharpened one. Crucially, even if they wanted to refuse, they couldn't. After all, Tony had already said from the outset that it was a gift, and since it was the most expensive item in the room, they wouldn't have been able to come up with a reason. Compared to this, Tony's request that they wear the armor at all times and follow everyone's lead seemed reasonable. After all, it was authentic Mingguang armor. Even if it were a modern replica, it's no exaggeration to say no one would refuse it, especially Ziyan and Yin, whose jobs involve physical violence. If two official members of the Rabbit Club acted this way, how could the rest of them not be outrageous? Tony had definitely been cramming his knowledge of rabbit history these past few days, and with his recent upbringing, his wardrobe choices were remarkably precise. Take, for example, the dragon robe Tony had himself. Yes, you read that correctly, a dragon robe. Note, not the Qing Dynasty style braided dragon robe, but a proper Tang Dynasty round-necked one. Add that slicked back hair and Tony's signature mustache. And he truly had a certain Orfang-like demeanor. As for Pepper Potts, Tony had already donned the dragon robe, so how could Pepper Potts be left behind? Under Tony's arrangement, an exotic, glamorous version of Empress Chang'an came to life before everyone's eyes. Honestly, Sherlock felt a dull ache in his neck just looking at the phoenix crown atop Pepper Potts's head. But the amazing thing was, these women were so drawn to it, a fact Sherlock couldn't understand. With the Emperor and Empress already out, the rest of the group had to be included. Sherlock objected, even somewhat repulsed, but Tony had paid for it, and the decision was unanimous. So, despite his reluctance, Sherlock was immediately given the attire of a crown prince, inexplicably becoming Tony's son. Fortunately, Sherlock was Tony's junior in terms of seniority, so he reluctantly accepted. Perhaps Tony had seen through Wanda's subtle scheming, a traitor with ulterior motives, and quietly nudged her behind the scenes, allowing her to dress like a crown princess. While Sherlock remained oblivious to the matter, he had to admit that Wanda was well suited to traditional rabbit clothing like Hanfu. After all, while both were foreigners, her appearance leaned towards the east. At least, after she was dressed like that, she didn't look as strange as Pepper Potts' Empress Chang'an. As for the remaining two girls, Tony didn't have any hard and fast rules. They each found two beautiful Confucian dresses to suit their preferences, which looked quite adorable. It's worth noting that Tony had originally intended for Quicksilver to wear the official robes of a minister, so that the group would have some unity when they went out to play, like an emperor with his princes and princesses. However, to everyone's surprise, Quicksilver showed no interest in the so-called official uniforms. Instead, he gazed at the armor worn by Ziyan and the others with a gleaming gaze. His gaze was as if he had seen some beautiful woman, which made Ziyan and the others feel a little embarrassed. They even wondered how they could react politely if Quicksilver was truly a pervert. Fortunately, Quicksilver was not a pervert, he was simply envious of the full set of Mingguang armor worn by the two men. At this point, we have to talk about the clerk on the rabbit side. It can only be said that the clerk who is open for business is very knowledgeable. He saw Quicksilver's needs almost at a glance. Combined with Tony's intentional or unintentional thoughts when choosing clothes, the clerk actually stood up and recommended a set of inner guard half-armor Hanfu to Quicksilver. How to say it, Although this inner guard half-armor Hanfu is indeed not as imposing as the full-armor Mingguang armor worn by Xian and the others, but in terms of handsomeness and comfort, Quicksilver's inner guard half-armor Hanfu is far superior to the Mingguang armor worn by Xian and the others. For this reason, Quicksilver agreed without any hesitation. The rest is naturally the so-called makeup. Fortunately, there are enough makeup artists in the store, otherwise it is really hard to say when he can set foot on the streets of the legendary Tang Dynasty city that never sleeps. Chapter 590, Foreign Royals in the Tang Dynasty's Nightless City, Part 2. After 40 minutes of hustle and bustle, the team Tony had handcrafted finally arrived at the starting point of the Tang Dynasty city, beneath the statue of Xuanzang beneath the big wild goose pagoda. Their mere appearance caused a stir on the entire street. After all, there wasn't another team on the street with such elaborate attire and makeup. Fang's own hint of Hu ancestry, combined with the aura of Tony's long-standing position and the cover of night, gave them a feeling of Fang possessing them. The fact that they spoke exclusively in English and Pepper's appearance were a bit distracting, otherwise everyone might have mistaken them for some new Tang Dynasty city attraction. Even so, with their wealth, Sherlock and his crew were the coolest looking on the street. After all, when it came to makeup and clothing, it was hard to find anyone who could surpass them. And most importantly, since they were already here and dressed up, they naturally went all out. Z, fully armored, led the way, followed by Tony and Pepper Potts as the Emperor and Empress. Behind them came Wanda and Sherlock as the Crown Prince and Crown Princess. Behind them, Quicksilver, the inner guard, guarded the two little girls who accompanied the princess, and finally, Yin Lai brought up the rear. The group attracted a lot of attention along the way, even attracting curious people following them. It looked like the Emperor was leading the princes and ministers on a trip. Sherlock, a man of fun, would even occasionally make a scene. For example, he would pull out the imperial seal he had purchased and shout, "The imperial seal is in my hand. I am the Lord's mandate. Why don't you kneel down?" Or he would simply hold the seal in Tony's face and shout, "The imperial seal is in my hand. Abdicate immediately. Pass the throne to me. I am the Lord's mandate." Of course, the former was easy enough. Occasionally, when the mood struck, Tony would even playfully play along with Sherlock. As for the latter, haha, Tony's exact words were, "You're just a fool, and you want to learn Fang's story about the Xuanwu Gate incident? Have you forgotten what happened to Li Chengqian in history?" But it was obvious that Tony's limited knowledge of history couldn't compare to Sherlock, who had been a Tang Dynasty fan even before his time travel. Amidst the crowd's laughter, Sherlock held up the imperial seal, smiling brilliantly, and calmly replied, "How do you know you're Fang and not Li Yuan? And how do you know I'm Chengqian and not Fang? You must abdicate today. I hold the seal by destiny. Your failure is God's will. How dare you dare to defy heaven?" This statement drew cheers from the surrounding audience, and amidst the applause, Sherlock naturally received the punishment for his attempt to usurp the throne. Pepper couldn't stand the awkward antics of the two, one older and one younger. With the increasing number of people gathered around to watch this Xuanwu Gate incident, Pepper felt a bit socially frustrated. Empress Changsun was completely unable to suppress the two, triggering another round of laughter from the crowd. Someone, eager to stir up trouble, even shouted, "Li Shimin, are you afraid of your wife too?" Tony's eyes nearly flew up his sleeve. After the two's outburst, everyone in this new Tang Dynasty city of knights gained a bit of fame, even alerting officials to come out to maintain order. With these officials on board, the already high-profile crowd looked more like an imperial visit. Even when the crowd tried to buy some snacks at the snack street, they were met with taunts from curious onlookers, asking, "Why is the Emperor buying food in person?" To which Sherlock, ever the onlooker, would always respond, "What do you know? This is called a tour to experience the suffering of the people." Then it caused another burst of laughter from the people around. In the end, even Wanda wanted to beat Sherlock. Even some of the performances in the Tang Dynasty city that never sleeps were overshadowed by the crowd. However, it must be said that the layout and scenery of the entire Tang Dynasty city that never sleeps are really great, with snack streets everywhere and countless specialty shops. There are even various performances, coupled with the lights and the surrounding imitation Tang Dynasty buildings. It really lives up to the name of Cyber Tang Dynasty mentioned by netizens. After walking the whole trip from beginning to end, everyone present gained a lot. Let's talk about snacks first. What impressed Sherlock the most was a thing called Tang Poetry Burned, which made various Tang Dynasty poems into snacks and sold them to customers. It must be said that this thing is really beautiful, but to be honest, Sherlock actually thinks it doesn't taste good. The rest of the street is quite good. After all, it's a commercial street, and along the way, you can find not only local Schengen snacks, but also snacks from all corners of the country. The local specialties and souvenir shops are equally well stocked, offering everything from cultural artifacts from museums to hand-woven trinkets, and even a variety of intangible cultural heritage crafts. It's easy to say everyone gets a lot out of this place. Sherlock even bought a handwritten rice paper pen and was incredibly satisfied. And most importantly, the street is constantly filled with performances, live streams from influencers, and even a Tang poetry giveaway. Countless young women in hanfu dresses take photos around the area, guided by cameramen. After a while, you get the uncanny feeling of a fusion between ancient Schengen's most prosperous Zhuge Street and modern streets, as if you were walking along the main roads of the Tang dynasty thousands of years ago, experiencing the essence of its bustling streets. After daybreak, the entire street returned to its original tranquility and peace, as if everything that happened last night was just an illusion. The streets of the Tang dynasty never appeared last night, and you didn't really travel through time. The dreamlike scene, coupled with this sense of time and space confusion, almost made everyone present immersed in it, and even forgot the time. By the time everyone got on the bus back to the hotel, it was almost midnight. What everyone didn't expect was that the impact of this impulsive Li Tang royal family cosplay trip tonight lingered even after everyone returned to the Eagle Sauce side. Even the officials of the Tang Dynasty city that never sleeps finally imitated the model of these people and really created a set of Emperor's Parade Easter eggs, appearing from time to time on the streets of the Tang Dynasty city that never sleeps to enjoy the people. Chapter 591, Sherlock's Group, Part 1. Unlike Sherlock's group, who were enjoying hot springs and exploring the city, the captain's group was the perfect control group for Sherlock's group, living a truly miserable existence. While Sherlock and his group were praying in temples and enjoying a meal in the imperial capital, the captain was desperately fighting the enemy in the deep mountains and forests, risking injury. While Sherlock and his group were enjoying the finest banquets in the imperial capital, nearly swallowing their tongues, the captain and his group were silently bandaging their wounds and eating their unpalatable individual rations on the plane. While Sherlock and his group were cosplaying as the Irfang family in Schengen, the captain had just finished a battle and was dragging his exhausted body to interrogate prisoners captured during the battle. Crucially, it would have been fine if neither side knew what the other was doing, but Sherlock and his group were posting 800 WhatsApp moments a day. The captain, finally taking a break and looking to relax, opened his phone to see Sherlock and his group's WhatsApp moments flooding his screen. Even though Cap's team was filled with veteran spies and powerful children of the forest, Captain himself could even be called a century-old veteran, they couldn't withstand the onslaught of Sherlock and his crew. As the saying goes, they're afraid of their brother's suffering, but they're also afraid of their brothers driving Land Rovers. Sherlock and his crew's actions were essentially like repeatedly driving a Land Rover into Cap's group. As a direct result, Cap's team, aside from Vision, a Jarvis-esque evolution, who had no idea what was going on, and Falcon, who wasn't particularly familiar with Sherlock and his crew, the rest of Cap, Hawkeye, and Black Widow were all vulnerable to varying degrees. We're fighting for our lives, practically hanging our heads on our belts, while you guys are enjoying the feasts and even cosplaying as the Emperor? Why don't you ascend to heaven and stand shoulder to shoulder with the sun? The main antagonist capable of Cap's defense was, of course, our old friend, the legendary Hydra. Why, you say, Hydra has been hunted down for so long, so why are they still causing such immense trouble for the captain and his men? The story begins with Sherlock's imprisonment, when everyone devised a plan to uncover Hydra's undercover agents. As everyone knows, while Sherlock was incarcerated, the Hydra agents lurking within various factions, driven by his status, were eager to seize this precious trophy, and were constantly making subtle moves. However, since all parties had been notified long ago, these restless and deeply entrenched Hydra agents were naturally eliminated, vanished, and even many ambitious individuals were accidentally killed and simply vanished. It just so happened that these vanished agents were the seeds for the rise of Hydra's forces. Due to the ambitions of certain high-ranking officials, these so-called seeds were literally dug up, roasted, ground into powder, and then completely incinerated. Even the few minor figures who remained undetected were terrified. Why not just live your own lives, they thought. Why fight so hard for Hydra, this one enterprise? If such a thought had occurred during Hydra's heyday, it would have been immediately condemned. But now, it was clear that Hydra itself was struggling, so how could they care about these so-called traitors? Besides, since no one knew about their Hydra identity anyway, it would be better to dismantle it and deny it, living a peaceful life. Crucially, this sentiment wasn't just shared by the deeply hidden, undetected undercover agents, it was shared by many Hydra combatants. Unlike those undercover agents, however, these perennially active combatants were clearly not easy to deal with. Some lesser-known individuals simply exploited Hydra under false pretenses, then found themselves in obscure corners, where they lived the life of a wealthy tycoon. The more famous were more unlucky, even the most ruthless of the unlucky, the purest of the unlucky. Crossbones, once a 40-60 contender, was a prime example. Crossbones had tried hard, even going into hiding when Hydra was struggling. But over time, he came to the sad realization that he had become accustomed to a life of stalking the enemy, lacking any other skills besides his killer instincts. Furthermore, under the pressure of life, even finding a job as a bodyguard proved impossible. Everyone knew Crossbones was loyal to Hydra. Who would dare hire Crossbones as a bodyguard before Hydra was completely annihilated? He would be in jeopardy if his money and influence were still there. But asking Crossbones to earn a few thousand yuan like the rest of us ordinary people, under the oppression of an idiotic leader, would be worse than killing him. But life still requires money, and even Crossbones has to bow to the necessities of life. Of course, Crossbones didn't stop trying. After all, he was a frontline combat unit, and he figured his skills couldn't go to waste. Desiring a better life, he actually formed a team and tried his hand at mercenary life. Unfortunately, due to his past experience, few people dared to hire his mercenary unit, and they ultimately accepted a contract with an African warlord at a discount well below market price. However, during this contract, Crossbones encountered a rabbit codenamed Wolf Warrior, which resulted in the complete annihilation of his entire team. Honestly, if it weren't for Crossbones' extensive combat experience and his ability to escape despite his injuries, it's doubtful that Crossbones would still exist. This experience drove Crossbones completely mad, a feeling that the world had no room for him. So, under the guise of a failed attempt to earn funds for the organization, Crossbones returned to Hydra's ranks. Hydra, already battered by the situation, welcomed Crossbones' return despite understanding the situation. Crossbones' return to Hydra only grew more frantic, fueled by the captain's constant attacks on Hydra. His madness and brutality earned him the respect of the few remaining Hydra leaders, who even promoted him to the helm of a combat unit. To everyone's surprise, after taking command, Crossbones mutinied, becoming the de facto leader of Hydra, vowing to make the captain and his men pay the price for their actions. Chapter 592, Sherlock's Group, Part 2. As the saying goes, don't chase a desperate enemy. Captain clearly didn't understand the rabbit's philosophy and pursued Hydra relentlessly. On the Hydra side, the more Captain pressed on, the more frantic Hydra became. The more frantic Hydra's actions grew, the more Captain felt threatened, and the tighter they pressed, further driving the entire Hydra organization insane. It was a vicious cycle. This was the main reason Captain and his crew felt increasingly powerless. Honestly, if it weren't for the metahuman vision's backup, Captain, Hawkeye, and Black Widow would have been unable to handle the increasingly frenzied Hydra. Furthermore, seeing Sherlock and his crew living in polar opposites to their own lives, their breakout seemed even more plausible. Fortunately, despite being broken and exhausted, Captain, after interrogating the captives, understood the primary cause of his exhaustion. The moment he heard Crossbones' name, and as he left, Sherlock's words immediately came to Captain's mind. Honestly, Cap, this out-of-date old man might not have much faith in Tony's technology, but he was in awe of Sherlock's magic. Especially after learning of Sherlock's supposed prophetic powers, Cap took Sherlock's words very seriously. So, after so many battles, when Cap learned Crossbones was now the leader of Hydra, he immediately explained the situation to everyone and, amidst everyone's expectant gazes, called Sherlock. What? Why those expectant gazes? That's just nonsense. It's said that we're both worried about our brother's hardships and about them driving Land Rover cars. How could we possibly balance the fact that Sherlock and his men were enjoying the feasts while we were fighting tooth and nail here? And most importantly, without a compelling reason, based on everyone's understanding of Sherlock, even if we really asked him to come back, he probably wouldn't agree, At best, he'd just give a perfunctory response. What could be a more perfect reason than Sherlock's own? More importantly, after so many frantic battles, everyone truly missed the days when Sherlock, the master of cleaning up after himself, was around. It was truly relaxing back then. While the captain and his crew were thrilled to finally have a reason to call Sherlock back to work, in their excitement, they overlooked the vexed reality of jet lag. Sherlock had just finished a long day's travels, recently returned from the Tang Dynasty's never-sleeping city, and was soundly asleep after a shower when the captain called. As everyone knows, tired people often sleep more deeply, and even when woken, they're still groggy. Unfortunately, Sherlock, after a long day of travel, was in this exact state. When the captain's phone rang, Sherlock instinctively reached out and answered it, saying, "I'm sleeping. We'll talk tomorrow morning at court." Then, he rolled over and dozed off again. The captain listened in bewilderment to the rabbit-like voice coming from the phone, followed by the steady snoring that followed. Sherlock hadn't even hung up the phone before falling back asleep. In the simple command room, everyone listened to Sherlock's steady snoring, and for a moment, they fell silent and utterly dazed. "Wow, we're working so hard here, and you're sleeping so soundly over there," others didn't know, but the captain and Hawkeye had the urge to wake Sherlock, and in fact, they did. Unfortunately, no matter how loud they shouted, the sound coming through Sherlock's phone was so muted that it couldn't disturb his sleep. Finally, Black Widow spoke with more reason, addressing the two men who had lost their composure. "Let's just say, is there a possibility that it's the early morning hours over there, and he's asleep without any problems?" This statement brought back some sanity, and they hung up the phone. Of course, this doesn't mean the captain has no way to deal with Sherlock. After all, if he can't contact Sherlock, who else can he contact? It's fair to say that there's a reason why people still pair up Captain and Tony. The red and blue pairings have been a well-documented history. After failing to contact Sherlock, the captain actually called Tony directly. And according to the captain, he was certain that Tony, a night owl, was definitely awake. As it turned out, the captain wasn't wrong at all. Tony really hadn't slept. Tony, however, was a little confused when he received the captain's call. After learning about what the captain and his group had been up to, Tony immediately made arrangements. He told the captain and his group to go back and rest. He would finish all his trips tomorrow and take Sherlock back by plane. It was a good opportunity to take advantage of the time they were leaving to have a break. After all, even if they were going to destroy Hydra, 1 or 2 days wouldn't be enough. Tony's argument successfully persuaded Captain America and his crew, and both sides happily reached an agreement. If anyone was unhappy, it would probably be Sherlock, who learned the news the next morning. After all, according to the original itinerary, today's itinerary was the Shrunksy History Museum, which Sherlock had been looking forward to for a long time. The Shrunksy History Museum, where bronze is everywhere and porcelain is worthless. Moreover, before crossing over, Sherlock had already had his eye on the cultural and creative products there, such as the Jade Seal bus card. Although he no longer had any use for it after crossing over, it didn't stop Sherlock from wanting to collect it. Sherlock mentally blamed Captain America's entire family, even going so far as to target the Hydra operative, Sherlock, especially the unfortunate Crossbones. Sherlock paid special attention to Crossbones among the Hydra operatives. The unlucky scoundrel chose to show up at Sherlock's happiest time, not earlier or later. Sherlock swore he'd remembered this grudge and was determined to get his revenge. As for how to get revenge on Crossbones, the guy who couldn't even eat 4 dishes in his life, Sherlock had a concrete idea. All that remained was to put it into action. But it would be hard for the Shrunksy History Museum, which he had always cherished. Could it be that even after traveling through time, he still had no connection to this legendary museum? Wait. Did Tony just mention that he had to fly back because of visa issues? A bold idea immediately popped into Sherlock's mind. Chapter 593, A Sneak Peek, Part 1. Sherlock's plan was simple. It would take a whole day to fly from the Rabbits back to the Eagles, so instead of spending all that time stuck on the plane, they could just go out and have some fun. As for the specifics, it was simple. All they wanted was legal immigration clearance, which was easy enough, especially since their plane was private. After everyone boarded the plane, couldn't they just open a portal and go out and have fun? They could even return to the plane to rest afterward. Wouldn't that be perfect? Of course, this plan wasn't without its drawbacks. there were two undeniable drawbacks. The first was that, legally, they had already left the rabbit's borders, so theoretically, any authentication required wouldn't be possible. However, there were solutions. With 3.5 wizards present, Sherlock, the Ancient One, Wanda, and Mindy, who was only half a wizard, it was easy for them to bypass the authentication process. The second point, however, was the real challenge. If they truly did this, they could be certain there would be no official explanations like those given by A, B, C, and D. This is what truly broke Sherlock and the others' defenses. Don't underestimate the power of a simple explanation. Take the Terracotta Warriors, for example. With an explanation, you can learn about their history, the difficulty of restoration, how they were discovered, and the purpose of each pit. But without an explanation, all you see are just rows of clay figurines nestled in 3 large pits. It's fair to say you're looking at the clay figures, and they're looking at you. As for the meaning, there's nothing there. Even though Sherlock was a rabbit in his previous life, if you ask him to explain something about the Terracotta Warriors, the best he can do is recite a text, nothing more. Therefore, everyone considers explanations absolutely indispensable. It's no exaggeration to say that a good tour guide can truly enhance your travel experience. Obviously, there are solutions. After all, the places Sherlock wants to visit have official explanations. But one thing is certain, official explanations, because they have to be responsible for their own words, are definitely not as interesting as other explanations. But after all, special cases require special treatment. There's always a solution, right? Everyone quickly divided up their destinations. Pepper wanted to go shopping, grab some local specialties and goodies only available in the rabbit area, so she brought along Wanda, Quicksilver, and Tony. She had originally wanted to bring the 2 little girls along, but Sherlock sternly refused. The reason was simple: Sherlock wanted to take the little girls to the Shinxie History Museum. Compared to shopping, Sherlock believed the Shinxie History Museum was more educational. Besides, all the good stuff from Chang'an was there, nothing could be more captivating. Besides, only there could one encounter real history. Real history, mind you. Not some foreign, fake history. After all, Rabbit was the only one on Earth who could truly claim to have a history of their own. As for all that Western history, it was bullshit. After all, if you can't even understand the writings of your ancestors, how can you even talk about history? Initially, the 2 girls weren't particularly interested in Sherlock's museum visit, but upon hearing that Chang'an's most valuable items were housed there, their eyes lit up, and they declared they had to see it. As for the remaining 3 bosses, they honestly weren't interested in either group's destination, but were very interested in Sherlock's wild idea. After some discussion, Ancient One also suggested a destination for the 3. After all, as an old monster who'd been starving for countless years, Ancient One had a hidden gem of hidden gems, including a number of unknown wild hot springs. The 3 had enjoyed a refreshing hot spring soak in Chang'an and were obsessed with it. When Ancient One mentioned some natural wild hot springs he knew about, the 3 immediately expressed their desire to experience them. Of course, being Ancient One, while those wild hot springs were also on Rabbit's side, it was certain they weren't in Chang'an. As for where they were, no one knew. After confirming the landing time with the captain, 3 portals immediately opened within the plane's cabin. The group split into 3 groups, each carrying their own gear and heading for their respective destinations. Sherlock's destination was, of course, the Shinxie History Museum. Keep in mind, this place requires reservations for tickets, making it incredibly difficult for even Chang'an locals to secure one. It's arguably the most popular destination in Chang'an. Of course, none of this mattered to Sherlock. Without the captain's call, Sherlock and his group would have received official tickets, but now it was clear that even a reservation was impossible. So, Sherlock shamelessly cheated, opening a portal in a relatively unoccupied restroom within the Shinxie History Museum and skipping ticket control. While the Shinxie History Museum might appear small from the outside, even seemingly tiny, this was actually an illusion. The collections within were organized into distinct periods of dynasties. What puzzled Sherlock was that while admission to the Shinxie History Museum was free, the guided tours were charged according to the collection. To truly understand the artifacts within, one had to pay to enter the exhibition hall. While the fees weren't substantial, only around 150 yuan per hall, it still felt a bit awkward, considering other places offered a one-time fee for the entire tour. But once Sherlock and the 2 girls entered one of the 7 sex exhibition halls, He instantly understood why the fee was per haul. The reason was simple: the sheer number of artifacts. Within less than 10 meters of the entrance alone, Sherlock's eyes were flooded with a vast array of medium-sized bronze artifacts, almost blinding him. And most importantly, according to the guide, each of these bronze artifacts was priced at no less than 8 figures. That's almost as much as the equivalent value in gold. The girl's eyes had completely transformed into the shape of gold. Of course, Sherlock was still able to remain calm. After all, as a rabbit in his previous life, Sherlock knew that the sale of bronze artifacts was illegal. Therefore, this thing has always been in a state of being in short supply. Of course, Sherlock also gained a lot. The most important thing was that Sherlock learned a very strange thing through the tour guide's explanation. That is, the nobles from the Spring and Autumn period and the Warring States period to the Qin and Han dynasties seemed to have a strange habit. Whenever they encountered something they wanted to record, they liked to cast a bronze artifact and then engrave the event on the bronze artifact in the form of an inscription. The direct result of this is that although those inscriptions look very beautiful, in fact, 6 or 7 out of 10 recorded things are just gossip about drinking with friends today, so-and-so did something funny, etc. It can only be said that gossip is indeed a topic that the human species cannot avoid. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 594: A Sneak Peek, Part 2. Of course, besides these gossips, there are also numerous bronze artifacts recording important events. The difference is quite clear. Those recording gossips are mostly cooking utensils or wine vessels used by the nobility at the time, while those recording important events are mostly ritual vessels or musical instruments used in sacrifices. In other words, people at that time placed great emphasis on ritual music and sacrifices, which were the most important, sacred, and solemn ceremonies. Therefore, the bronzes here are often of the highest quality, with the most comprehensive records and the most solemn content. Of course, while the Shaanxi History Museum is impressive and boasts a large collection of bronze artifacts, it is not the eldest son of a legitimate family. Many of the truly valuable items, such as treasures used for national sacrifices, have been borrowed by the Prince's National Museum within the museum. These museums don't even know the return date. Don't you see that in a TV program before Sherlock's time travel, when the National Museum's collection was mentioned, the screen was filled with comments like "Give me back my big tripod." Just those comments alone reveal the depth of the resentment these non-legitimate museums harbor. But that doesn't mean a top-tier museum like the Shaanxi History Museum isn't packed with treasures. Sherlock was particularly impressed by a bronze artifact known as the Bronze Dragon. Two enormous dragons intertwined, coiled together, the entire bronze artifact stretching over a meter. The shapes of the two dragons are clear and bright, even the scales appear lifelike. However, due to its age, even experts can't guess what the twin dragons were used for, only vaguely guessing they served as a base for something. Sherlock even saw a model of a Qin dynasty bronze chariot from the mausoleum of the Qin emperor, and marveled at how his charming ancestor truly was the world's earliest and greatest collector of figurines. Just look at this bronze chariot and horses, it's even more exquisite than modern models. From the details of the vehicle to the carvings of the figures and the casting of the horses, everything is incredibly lifelike. In other words, aside from the non-1-to-1 scale, this thing is truly authentic. Seeing these exquisite bronze artifacts, so difficult to replicate even today, difficult to replicate means crafted using ancient methods, not modern industrial methods, Sherlock truly agreed with what many netizens have said about historical novels. Our ancestors simply didn't see as much as we do, didn't understand the world as well as we do, they weren't stupid. After witnessing these exquisite bronze artifacts and the intricate casting techniques, Sherlock felt he could no longer endure the fabricated fabrications of historical novels. Of course, his biggest regret was, damn, even after traveling through time, not a single predecessor offered to find our fascinating ancestor and grant him an elixir of immortality or a world map. Otherwise, who knows what Marvel would be like now? Would Thanos arrive on Earth only to find himself caught in an endless people's war? Or would 8 billion madmen be unleashed to establish an interstellar Qin dynasty and build a universal wall? Sherlock couldn't imagine it. After concluding his visit to the Qin and Han dynasty pavilion, Sherlock hired a guide to explore the subsequent halls. Unfortunately, the quantity and quality of the artifacts on display there couldn't compare to the impressiveness of the Qin and Han Dynasty Pavilion. However, there was no way around it. After all, starting with the Sui and Tang dynasties, iron tools gradually replaced bronze and became a fixture of people's lives. While the advent of iron was a boon for civilization as a whole, it was a disaster for archaeology. Compared to bronze, iron rusted much more easily and was lost in the ravages of history, much like the Tang dynasty's Modeo. Almost anyone familiar with history knows how renowned the Tang dynasty's Modeo was and how formidable its achievements were in battle. Unfortunately, no actual Modeo has ever been unearthed, cloaking this once powerful weapon in a shroud of mystery. The primary reason for this is the immaturity of technology and the difficulty of preserving iron artifacts. But that doesn't mean there aren't wonderful finds in other pavilions. Sherlock will tell you, there are, and quite a few. While many are small trinkets like gold, bronze mirrors, jade, copper, and silver, they're still quite astonishing. After all, who wouldn't love a pavilion glittering with gold? Jokingly, starting with the Sui and Tang dynasty pavilions, many of the gold items in the pavilion are worth more than the current price of gold, even though they're also made of gold. Sherlock was particularly impressed by a display case in a corner. It was just an ordinary case, but the contents were truly captivating. There was a mountain of gold cakes, and even Sherlock had never seen the legendary horseshoe gold in person. The glittering spectacle became the most crowded part of the pavilion. It goes to show that the desire for gold is a human instinct, no matter what. Of course, Sherlock also saw a very interesting little item, currency from the time. While they were all round coins with square holes, this was Sherlock's first time seeing gold coins. It turns out gold coins and other such things aren't just popular with foreigners, we have them here too. Of course, besides these things, Sherlock also had his eye on the things he wanted to see most, including the imperial seal that looked like the bus card. However, unlike Sherlock's imagination, this thing wasn't the emperor's seal, but the empress's. That was quite disconcerting. Of course, he took photos of all the other treasures, like Duguzin's jet seal, the gilded, silver-plated, and bronze bamboo incense burner, the tiger talisman, and the sachet ball. The rest, of course, was a delightful shopping trip. The cultural and creative products at the Shanxi History Museum are renowned throughout the country, and Sherlock had been eager to get his hands on them for a while. First, he got the bus card he'd coveted for 2 lifetimes, then the life-size replica incense burner, and the tiger talisman. He even bought a sachet ball for each of the 2 girls, and they were very pleased. It's worth mentioning that Sherlock also bought a polyhedron seal made of obsidian, the same design as Duguzin's, to give to Tony. After all, if Sherlock remembers correctly, Tony will have a daughter in the future. Compared to Duguzin, the strongest father-in-law of the Warring States period, Tony, the father-in-law of the world's richest man, is no worse. It's just that Duguzin's title of strongest father-in-law is due to his son-in-law's awesomeness, while Tony's title is likely due to his awesomeness. They're both the strongest father-in-law, so the difference isn't too big. Chapter 595, Muslim Street and City God Temple, Part 1. It was almost afternoon when they left the Shanxi History Museum. After a morning of cultural immersion, both Sherlock and the 2 girls were starving. So, Sherlock decided to go eat. When it comes to Chang'an's most famous food streets, Human Street is undoubtedly on the list. Despite rumors of poor value and subpar food, Sherlock decided to check it out. While you could go to places like Yongxingfang just for the food, Human Street is a must-see for any tourist in Chang'an. And, most importantly, unlike Yongxingfang, a visit to Human Street also includes a visit to Chang'an City God Temple. As the most important deity in rabbit culture, the city god is a temple found in every major city within the Great Wall, with the most developed and renowned being the City God Temple in Shanghai. However, compared to Chang'an City God Temple, the Magic City City God Temple couldn't compare in terms of scale. You know, in other places, a City God Temple is just a City God Temple, but in Chang'an, the ancient capital of the 6 dynasties and the birthplace of Han culture, the City God Temple here is called the Du City God Temple. Du means the capital of the City God Temple, meaning the capital. In other words, Chang'an City God Temple is the capital of all City God Temples. Furthermore, City God Temples have always been Taoist sites. Sherlock believes more in Taoism than the more foreign Buddhist teachings. Sherlock had visited the city god temple on his last trip to Magic City, and this time, there was no reason to miss it. While Yuanxingfang could also include a visit to the Chang'an City Wall, they were on a sneak peek, and even with rest breaks, they only had 24 hours. Sherlock was a bit intimidated by a place like the city wall, where once you're up, it's difficult to get back down. Along the way, the taxi driver's stand-up comedy performances captivated everyone as they happily arrived at the entrance to Muslim Street, a must-see destination in Chang'an, the Bell and Drum Tower. Despite its name, the Bell Tower and Drum Tower are actually separate structures. The Bell Tower is an ancient structure built on an island in the center of a circular driveway, while the Drum Tower is a separate structure located a short distance away. The Drum Tower's architectural specifications and height far surpass those of the Bell Tower. The Drum Tower boasts 24 large drums, each inscribed with the traditional 24 solar terms of the Rabbit region, forming a complete circle around the Drum Tower on a tall pedestal. Unfortunately, due to time constraints and extreme hunger, Sherlock and the two girls didn't bother climbing the Drum Tower. They simply took a quick photo and checked in below before dashing off to Muslim Street behind it. It's fair to say that despite the endless negative online reports about Muslim Street, it remains a symbol of Chang'an culture, attracting a steady stream of tourists. Foreigners like Sherlock and the two lawless were countless. As for the food in Muslim Street, Sherlock could only say that it was the same everywhere. Capital had entered the market, long since losing its local character. It was a phenomenon that had blossomed all over the world. Don't believe it? After walking less than 10 meters, Sherlock saw at least one stall selling the same snack, octopus balls, that you'd find in Zylorizi. And the most outrageous thing was, Chang'an wasn't near the sea, yet they still had grilled squid. A specialty only found in coastal areas. And as for the stinky tofu, well, isn't that a staple of snack streets here in Rabbit? Sherlock hadn't found a single snack street in his entire life that didn't have it. Of course, while some complaints were necessary, this was Chang'an after all. While there were plenty of national snacks mingling, there were still plenty of local Chang'an snacks. Of course, this only applies to Sherlock, a foreigner with a shrewd inner self. As for the two purebred foreign lawless, how could they possibly be so picky about authenticity as Sherlock? They just wanted to eat as long as it was delicious. Anyway, the two lawless eyes lit up at the sight of the food on either side of the street. As the saying goes, a grown-up boy can eat his way to death, don't assume girls can't eat. Sherlock's two lawless have a formidable appetite. After all, they're two serious, aggressive lawless. Of course, since they're his family, Sherlock didn't skimp. He turned into a ruthless payment machine, letting the two lawless eat to their heart's content. However, Sherlock still had to provide the necessary guidance. Most importantly, he told the two lawless not to foolishly order two of the same dish, but to order one and share it between them. After all, even the most voracious appetites have their limits. This snack street is vast, and if they want to eat more, they need to learn how to share food. The two girls immediately embraced Sherlock's suggestion as a classic, even going so far as to recruit him. After all, unlike Sherlock, the two girls saw this entire street as a treasure trove of mysterious Eastern delicacies they had never seen or heard of before. And unlike Western food, where expensive food often means good taste and cheap food means bland and calorie-laden, the food here at Rabbit Village, regardless of price, is characterized by its unique flavor. While expensive restaurants are certainly delicious, the food from snack streets, pushcarts, and small workshops isn't necessarily much worse. Even in a place like the imperial capital, where hidden gems abound, some of these cheap eateries might even rival five-star restaurants. Do you know why there are so few Michelin-rated restaurants in Rabbit Village? The difference in national conditions is partly to blame, but the food here is also incredibly delicious. It's truly difficult to choose. Together, the three of them ate their way from Penglai East Road to Nanshanmen, or rather, from behind the Drum Tower all the way to the other side of the snack street. Whenever they encountered something new, the three of them would stop to try it. They'd try Chang'an's local specialties like foam, water basin lamb, zhengyao, and gourd chicken, not to mention the Inner Mongolian delicacy of belly-stuffed pork, the delicious egg burgers and meatballs from who knows where, and even the red willow barbecue from the western regions. Of course, there were also things they couldn't stomach, the most typical example being a local Chang'an yogurt brand. Damn, they had a chili oil flavor. Chili oil? Yogurt? Huh? Sherlock swore his cerebellum nearly withered when he saw that combination. Chapter 596, Muslim Street and City God Temple, Part 2. Aside from the yogurt flavor, which was enough to make your brain shrink, Sherlock found the rest of the food quite tasty, from hot to cold dishes to desserts. The three of them each enjoyed a raugiamo, a type of raugiamo, to end the meal. Sherlock remained adamant that his raugiamo, often called Schengen's most authentic, couldn't compare to his homemade raugiamo, made with braised pork, green peppers, and egg. But it had to be said that the countless sour plum soups along the street were truly delicious. Regardless of whether they were industrial or homemade, the flavor was truly exceptional. And most importantly, each one tasted different, and each one was equally delicious. That was truly remarkable. Unlike Sherlock, who was a sucker for sour plum soup, the two girls seemed to prefer the freshly brewed clay pot pear soup. After learning about its beauty-enhancing properties, they became even more eager for it. Sherlock even secretly took a sip and commented that it was not as good as his own sour plum soup, not even as good as the pomegranate juice that was everywhere in Schengen. But the two girls firmly believed that this thing was the best. Sherlock was extremely speechless and even wanted to tell the two girls that you two are of the same race as her mother's white people, the whitest white people in the world. And considering your age, even without beauty treatments, you two have the most tender skin in the entire training ground. However, considering the fighting power of the two girls, Sherlock honestly swallowed the words that were about to come out of his mouth. After eating and drinking, Sherlock led the two girls towards the gate of the City God Temple. After walking a short distance, they saw the huge archway of the City God Temple. Unfortunately, Sherlock arrived at an inopportune time. The entire gate of the City God Temple was under renovation when Sherlock arrived, so he couldn't see the entire entrance. However, this didn't affect the bustling commercial street inside. Entering the gate, one immediately feels like stepping into a childhood market. The reason for this development is simple: City God temples are generally located in the heart of a city, making them the very heart of commerce. Legend has it that this place was once the largest commercial center in the entire Northwest, even leading to the saying, "If you don't come here, you won't find everything you need." This gives you an idea of how bustling it once was. It's still quite the same now, but now the shops on both sides mostly sell City God Temple merchandise. At the end of this market street lies the legendary God of Wealth Temple, where three statues of the God of Wealth are enshrined. A very down-to-earth couplet is inscribed on the gate. For centuries, the pursuit of virtue has been universal, and the greatest virtue in the world is still reading. Such straightforward teachings. However, when Sherlock translated them to the two girls, the girls burning incense rolled their eyes in unison, suggesting that he should have said this to Quicksilver, who would have definitely listened. After offering sacrifices to the God of Wealth, Sherlock, speechless, led the girls forward. His attempts to reform the girls had been a waste of time. Sherlock gave up and lay down, letting things take their course. Soon after, they came into view of the ceremonial gate of the City God Temple. The ceremonial gate represented the ancient gate where civil officials would dismount from their sedan chairs and military officers from their horses and adjust their appearance. Upon entering the gate, looking up, they immediately saw a plaque reading "Tao follows nature," instantly permeating the air with a Taoist aura. Beyond this, they encountered another memorial archway, inscribed with four large characters that resonated deeply. The meaning is very clear. As long as your heart is sincere enough, the gods will fulfill your wishes. Of course, this does not mean that you do not need to work hard. You should know that there is an abacus hanging above these four big characters, and there is a line of small characters on it. Man proposes, God disposes. It is telling you to do your best and leave the rest to fate, and never lie down and give up. Behind this archway is the main hall of the entire City God Temple, where the City God Jizin is enshrined. Jizin was a general under Emperor Gaozu of Han, Liu Bang. Because he was loyal to Liu Bang and was unwilling to surrender to Xiongyu burned Jizin to death in a rage. Later, he was revered by the people as the city god who protects the peace of the area. This can be regarded as a unique culture here in the Rabbit area. The gods come from the people and also protect the people. Sherlock led the two lawless to respectfully burn incense and kowtow to the city god. The Taoist priest beside him was also very responsible. While Sherlock led the two girls in prayer, he struck a basin, and the crisp sound echoed throughout the hall. Sherlock and the two girls, who looked like foreigners, even told Sherlock that there were merit fruits nearby and he could take some on his way. Sherlock quickly thanked him gratefully, noting that the offerings were imbued with the scent of incense, the condensed power of countless believers. Eating them would only bring benefits, not harm. And most importantly, Sherlock saw someone else asking for fortunes and spent 20 yuan to get one. Well, the fortune was quite insightful, though a little unsettling for Sherlock. It roughly meant that Sherlock would meet his soulmate this year. Although their relationship had its ups and downs, it still had a happy ending. What the three of them didn't expect was that after paying homage to the city god and exiting the main hall, they saw 4 characters written in large letters on the back of the memorial archway, intelligent and upright. Above these 4 characters stood a plaque bearing the city god's blessing, inscribed with the words, "Good to have arrived." Honestly, Sherlock's eyes welled up at the sight of these 4 characters. It was a sentiment unique to Rabbit. Even as a god, he came from among the people and lived among them. Constantly thinking about the feelings of those he protected was the only way to write such heartfelt words. Compared to this, those foreign gods pale in comparison. The 2 girls didn't understand Sherlock's emotions, but they politely didn't bother him. After the 3 of them shared some of the offerings, Sherlock took the girls to pay their respects at the Fire God Temple and the Goddess Hall, both located off to the side, before finally leaving the City God Temple. The moment they exited the gate, Sherlock's melancholy faded. The moment he saw the plaque with these words hanging on the house opposite, the 2 girls were fascinated. "Okay, come again," these words, like a typical street vendor's sales pitch, made Sherlock burst out laughing. It was part of the Rabbit's unique sense of humor. Honestly, Sherlock had never imagined that a god would play a joke on him. It was magical, and also, very kind. Chapter 597 Hydra's Plan. Although Sherlock had spent the entire day with the 2 girls, visiting 3 scenic spots, when he returned to the plane through the portal, he discovered that he was still the first one back in the entire group. Just as Sherlock waited for a while but no one returned, he was about to open a portal to go home and sleep for a while, and then return to go through customs after the plane landed, when a portal suddenly opened. It was Pepper Potts and Wanda's group who returned. The 2 women in the lead had excited expressions on their faces, as if they were still not satisfied. However, the expressions on the faces of the 2 men following behind the 2 girls were quite interesting. Quicksilver looked terrified, and he looked so tired that he looked like a dog that had been pampered by college students. The feeling he gave off could be described in 4 words: despair. Quicksilver was someone who could run at top speed for an entire afternoon without stopping. Sherlock couldn't imagine what Quicksilver had been through that afternoon. As for Tony, the expression on his face was even more intriguing. It was as if he had witnessed something miraculous and also watched his mother die before his eyes. His exhaustion was tinged with disbelief, a look that was simply hilarious. After the 4 returned, they immediately split into 2 groups, 1 male and 1 female. The female group happily began distributing the loot they had snuck out to buy during their busy schedule. As for the male group, well, Sherlock couldn't contain his curiosity and began to question the 2 about their experiences. Quicksilver could understand, he'd simply been dragged through at least 50 shopping malls, treated like a runner, and exhausted himself. As for Tony, well, you might not believe it, but the reason for his behavior was simple. Pepper Potts had bought 5 shopping malls, 4 hotels, and 3 residential properties in just one day. Adding in all the other miscellaneous items, the total cost was a small fortune. Of course, a mere 100 million wasn't a lot of money for Tony, but what caught him off guard was Pepper's shopping escapades. What kind of person wouldn't buy clothes, bags, or jewelry when shopping, only to splash out on a shopping mall? Tony didn't understand, but he was deeply shocked. Most importantly, if you could call it a waste of money, Tony discovered through Jarvis's research that both the mall and the hotel Pepper purchased had significant profit potential. Even the 3 buildings were expected to double in value in the future. After all, Chang'an is a tourist destination, and its unique culture and location continue to attract young people, so price increases are inevitable. But if you were to say Pepper wasn't a spendthrift, everyone else was just buying normal goods, she was buying places that sold goods. This sense of conflict was the main reason Tony's expression was strange. Of course, another reason was that he'd walked too much today. After all, shopping with a woman is something anyone with a partner can relate to. Even a recently discharged Special Forces soldier can be easily swept off their feet, let alone a weakling like Tony. But what intrigued Sherlock was that even if Pepper Potts had bought a lot of real estate, it certainly wouldn't be enough to cover a small target's worth of US dollars, right? After all, Sherlock had just watched them return empty-handed. As he spoke of this, the two exhausted men looked at Sherlock with accusatory eyes, especially Quicksilver, whose resentment seemed to solidify. "I'd also like to know why Wanda can come and go freely in your kingdom, while I can only read in the library? And only books on potions? I even need Wanda's help to buy potions or ingredients." Okay, case solved. After a quick scan of his kingdom, Sherlock's face littered with embarrassment, and he found an excuse to fool Quicksilver. He couldn't just tell Quicksilver he was only half a disciple, could he? After some fun, everyone decided to head back to rest. After all, who would want to rest on a plane when they could sleep at home? So, the pilots had to fly the plane back home. As for the trio of bosses, well, no one knew where they'd gone, but given their reliable personalities, they'd probably be back before the plane landed. To Sherlock's surprise, the moment they passed through the portal, Sherlock, Tony, Wanda, and Quicksilver were snatched away by Captain America, who had been waiting at the training ground. The reason was simple: Captain America had learned a crucial piece of information. Captain America had somehow learned that Crossbones was now in control of Hydra. With Captain America and his men in pursuit, Hydra was desperate, ready for a final showdown with Captain America. No, that wouldn't be a showdown, but a desperate attempt to survive. Their solution was simple: start a world war. What better place to start a war than by annihilating the entire UK? You know, back then, the legendary Colonel Carl almost pulled it off, but he was just too aggressive. If he could have found one or two of the top three to show some support, it might have been the catalyst for Season 3. Of course, the captain and his team didn't know Hydra was aiming for a world war. They only knew that, under Crossbones' leadership, the remaining Hydra units had set their sights on a dangerous biological weapon. As for why they were acquiring this biological weapon, the captain and his team didn't know. This all stems from Crossbones' mutiny. It's fair to say that Crossbones, a veteran who had always fought on the front lines, was in some ways no match for those who relied on strategy and tactics. After all, those who relied on strategy and tactics were incredibly ruthless, making it incredibly easy for them to manipulate Crossbones. The reason Crossbones was able to pull off his mutiny so easily was simple: the people who had previously been in his orbit secretly aided him. The reason for this is simple. Cut off from their retreat, they're desperate. Their only remaining option is to emulate the former Hydra. First, they'll create a deranged leader similar to Red Skull. Then, covertly or overtly, have this leader instigate a worldwide war to divert attention from Hydra. This will buy them a respite while also allowing them to use the leader as a shield. Ultimately, whether the leader succeeds or fails, they'll have a way out. If they succeed, they're all Hydra members, naturally filled with joy. If they fail, it's all the leader's fault. They surrender and accept the situation. Remember, that's how Hydra transformed SHIELD into SHIELD. What? Why didn't Crossbones kill them after the mutiny? It's simple. Because of Hydra's system, these individuals possess either technology, connections, money, or simply Hydra's secrets. Each of these was something Crossbones had to consider as the leader, and naturally, they were also the amulets that kept these people alive. Unless Crossbones wanted to disband Hydra after taking over, he wouldn't be stupid enough to deal with these people, at least not openly. Chapter 598 Combat Arrangements. Of course, neither Captain America nor Sherlock knew these things. What they did know was that if they could control Crossbones, the remaining Hydra forces, no matter how powerful they were, would have a hard time wreaking havoc on the world. Therefore, all their plans revolved around Crossbones. Captain America's plan was simple. After Sherlock and his group returned, he would bring Wanda and Quicksilver with him to quickly eliminate Hydra's forces. If they could finally force Crossbones to reveal himself, they would be almost halfway there. Once Crossbones appeared, Sherlock would be the one to take over. Captain America believed Sherlock was omnipotent, and if he could get Crossbones to reveal the remaining Hydra members, that would be perfect. However, it was clear that Sherlock had little interest in Captain America. He wouldn't go against a Hydra agent who was as futile as a plaster. Just as uninterested as Sherlock was Quicksilver. He bluntly stated that he wanted to go to school and no longer be involved with the Avengers. His goal was to get into the Bunny's old Summer Palace Vocational and Technical College. The captain could understand Sherlock's attitude, but what was going on with Quicksilver? He was fine when he left, still frantically training to join the Avengers. It was just a trip, less than 2 weeks away, And now he wanted to go to school? The captain looked at Sherlock with suspicion, even beginning to wonder what kind of strange potion Sherlock had fed Quicksilver. Tony, however, was very supportive of Quicksilver's idea and promised to arrange a school and a teacher for him tomorrow. Under the captain's gaze, Sherlock nearly blushed. This was the most embarrassing thing about Sherlock's entire enjoyable travels. Fortunately, Sherlock had a very caring apprentice. Seeing Sherlock's almost blushing expression, the captain quickly explained the whole situation and said he was available. Seeing Wanda appear normal, Captain America breathed a sigh of relief. He had been genuinely afraid she'd become like Quicksilver. Of course, Sherlock didn't object. After all, Wanda and he had been studying magic for so long, it was time to practice it. Sherlock knew that working in isolation wasn't a good idea. Even Tony had promised to help Captain America privately deal with those pesky Hydras before he could enter the Avengers. Of course, Tony couldn't publicly participate, as he knew Tony had quit the Avengers. So, the plan went like this: Captain America would lead Hawkeye, Black Widow, Falcon Vision, and Tony to eliminate Hydra, while Sherlock, armed with Tony and Wanda's passports, used illusion magic to clear their entry. The entire process took only 3 days, and after that, the final counterattack against Hydra would begin. Of course, Tony couldn't participate in this counterattack, at least not publicly. So Pepper arranged a speaking engagement for Tony at MIT. As for whether Tony really wasn't participating, only the Avengers knew. 3 days passed quickly. The only unexpected incident during those 3 days was that Sherlock's luggage, filled with Chinese and other snacks like stinky tofu, was confiscated by customs upon entering the country. This left Sherlock frustrated for a long time, but while he was arguing with the customs officer, he saw a Taoist woman who had also been stopped by customs. The translator's brilliant translation had the officer pissing himself, avenging his own snacks. It was just one thing that made Sherlock a little overwhelmed: the sheer volume of Taoism being translated into voodoo. Sherlock swore the expression on the woman's face was truly captivating. She probably peed a few times when she heard the translator's brilliant translation. Unlike Sherlock's side, with Wanda and Tony on board, Cap's operation was much easier. Wanda, in particular, wasn't as skilled as Sherlock. Her magic wasn't as precise as Sherlock's, but she was still capable. At least Cap didn't have to worry about cleaning up afterward. After all, after the Battle of New York, Sherlock had already discussed environmental protection around the battlefield, and Cap and the others had taken it to heart. Wanda also gained a lot. First, through actual combat, Cap, Black Widow, and Hawkeye had taught her many tricks only experienced soldiers and spies could master. Secondly, she had honed her magical skills on her own. Although Sherlock had previously practiced with her, it was often difficult to get Wanda into the right form in less dangerous situations. Because of this, despite learning a lot of magic, her understanding was often superficial. But Hydra was different from Sherlock. Hydra was truly deadly. After all, this was a serious fight, unlike Sherlock's sparring sessions. In just 3 days, Wanda's magic not only improved dramatically, but she even invented a technique, untrained, that combined chaos magic with Sherlock's. While this technique was essentially similar to drawing a circle with your left hand and a square with your right, it was still a significant improvement. Even Wanda herself wasn't sure if this skill counted as progress, or if it would have any impact on her. So, until she could consult Sherlock and the Ancient One, she tried to minimize its use. After each battle, Wanda would review her combat and magic, jotting down any questions in a small notebook, waiting to discuss them with Sherlock and the Ancient One upon her return. It's a testament to the fact that actual combat is the fastest way to improve. By the end of the 3 days, even Sherlock hadn't expected Wanda's rapid progress, and he took the opportunity to teach her a great deal more magic and techniques. Of course, that didn't mean Sherlock didn't have any questions. In fact, Sherlock had been wanting to ask since Captain America took him to a meeting 3 days ago after returning from a break. Where's Antonia? Where's my big Antonia? After all, Sherlock hadn't seen her at the training grounds, not even among the Avengers. Remember, she'd joined the Avengers before going on a trip. Under Sherlock's constant questioning, Captain America admitted, somewhat awkwardly, that he'd assigned Antonia another mission, tracking down Captain America's best friend, the Winter Soldier. That job had originally been Falcon's, but after Tony stopped openly participating in the Avengers' activities, Captain America desperately needed air support, so he had to transfer Falcon back and have Antonia take over. Seeing Captain America's embarrassment, Sherlock didn't even try to hide his disdain. "Boy, you, the big-eyed Captain America, have learned to embezzle money, haven't you?" Chapter 599, Sherlock the Troublemaker, Part 1. In Lagos, Nigeria's largest port city, in Africa, in a busy street-side cafe, Wanda, wearing a locally bought cap, calmly stirred her coffee as she observed her surroundings. "What did you see?" the captain's voice came over the communicator. Wanda calmly put down her coffee and replied with a hint of resignation. "Some ordinary patrol officers, a tiny police station, a quiet neighborhood, a good target." It was clear that Wanda wasn't entirely confident in her answer. But the captain, evidently, didn't share her thoughts and immediately began to explain the situation to Wanda over the comms. "There's an ATM in the south corner, which means there are cameras. The two intersecting streets are one way, not a good escape route. In other words, our target isn't afraid of being seen, and doesn't even care about the chaos their actions cause. See that SUV half a block away, the red one? Well, it's not as good as Sherlock's Raptor, but it's not bad." Wanda answered the captain's question somewhat helplessly. After all, this was invaluable experience for Wanda. Even those who graduated from Sherlock's family training grounds often didn't have the direct, practical training that Wanda had. "I'm not asking you to pay attention to the make or appearance of the vehicle. The captain means it's bulletproof. That means there's private security here. That means there's a ton of guns here, which means this situation will cause even more headaches for some people, like us." Black Widow, sitting not far from Wanda, explained to her over the comms while calmly taking a sip of her coffee and even exclaiming in admiration, "You're right, this place might be in the middle of nowhere, but the coffee is actually delicious." Wanda's eyes nearly rolled up in anger at Black Widow's words, and she grumbled, "You should know that I, like my master Sherlock, can use magic, right?" Black Widow ignored Wanda's rant and continued to sip her coffee calmly. "Caution should become your instinct, it'll keep you alive in battle. After all, even with the most powerful magic, a bullet can still take your life. Has anyone ever told you that you're a little paranoid and overly cautious?" Falcon, perched high above, chose a perfectly opportune moment to mercilessly criticize Black Widow. Black Widow, naturally, didn't hold back and retaliated. "No one said that to my face." "What? Did you hear something?" Fortunately, the captain cut the rant short before it even began. "Hey, be serious. This is the closest we've ever gotten to Crossbones. You know, we didn't have much rest for 3 days to force him to show up. I don't want to miss this opportunity." However, the captain's voice had just fallen when a very cynical voice interrupted him, and the contempt in the voice was not even concealed. Right, choo-choo-choo, you spent a lot of effort, choo-choo-choo, and wiped out most of Hydra's combat power, choo-choo-choo, just to force Crossbones, the leader of Hydra, choo-choo-choo, to rob a police station, choo-choo-choo. I've said it a long time ago, choo-choo-choo. Captain, if you have that idea, choo-choo-choo, you might as well investigate which biological weapon Hydra is targeting, choo-choo-choo. This is the real business. Hey, choo-choo-choo, who developed this local porridge? Choo-choo-choo, it's quite delicious, choo-choo-choo. Yes, who else could say such cynical words that raise people's blood pressure? Of course, it was our troublemaker Mr. Sherlock. After hearing Sherlock's complaints, the captain turned and looked at Sherlock. At this time, Sherlock and the captain were on the second floor of a small hotel above Wanda and the others. Both were dressed in their signature combat uniforms, but compared to the captain's serious demeanor, Sherlock looked a bit, well, how should I put it, laid back? Sherlock, dressed in his signature wizard vest, was casually lounging on the bed, even happily enjoying a large plate of local specialties on his lap. What was jarring was that Sherlock's wizard vest alone evoked a dangerous mix of elegance and awe. The black mist covering his head also gave him a mysterious air, and even his glowing red eyes evoked a menacing aura. It should have been that way, but Alice, Sherlock's posture and actions effectively undermined the wizard's already impressive facade. After all, any good person would feel their expectations of their idol dashed when they saw a wizard lying on the bed like a scoundrel, spoonful after spoonful of porridge mixed with rice from a large plate into the black mist. At least, that's how the captain felt. After taking several deep breaths, The captain tried hard to suppress his urge to punch someone and said to Sherlock, "First of all, we don't know what kind of biological weapons Crossbones wants. Secondly, the intelligence we received is that Crossbones will attack this police station because the police station stores a lot of information about biological weapons and the access control to the laboratory. If Crossbones really wants to sneak into the laboratory, he can't avoid this place. Finally, dear Mr. Wizard, please don't talk while eating, and get the hell out of bed. Last but not least, you insisted on coming along for this operation." The captain's meaning was very clear. He didn't pray for Sherlock to help with this operation, but just asked him not to make trouble. However, it was obvious that Sherlock didn't think so. He threw the finished plate on the table. Sherlock didn't even stand up, and continued to look at the captain standing in front of him with a teasing tone. Of course. After all, I'm going to let you secretly assign some private missions to my beloved apprentice, right? And I'm here to clean up my beloved apprentice's mess. It has nothing to do with Hydra. Last but not least, my beloved apprentice has been with that bitch Vision for 3 whole days. 3 whole days. The more Sherlock spoke, the more aggrieved he felt. He was so busy letting Wanda train that he completely forgot that there was a ridiculous Vision in the captain's team. By the time Sherlock realized what was happening, he was regretting it. Sherlock, I think I need to make a statement. According to my calculations, you can rest assured that I have no thoughts about your beloved apprentice. Secondly, from the memories I inherited about Jarvis, the word bitch seems to be more applicable to you. As soon as Sherlock finished speaking, Vision's voice interrupted him. It would have been fine if Vision didn't say anything, but after hearing what he said, Sherlock's face turned red. Asshole, you're talking nonsense and calling me a bitch? Give me your coordinates. Come on. Give me your coordinates. I'm such a hot-tempered little bastard. Today, one of us must be left on this Black Brothers land and become fertilizer. Chapter 600 Sherlock the Troublemaker, Part 2. PFFT 4 After Sherlock and Redwin's outburst, the rest of the group finally burst out laughing. They'd been stifling their laughter ever since Sherlock started taunting Cap. After all, everyone present knew Cap was both guilty and upset about sending Antonia to find his good friend, the Winter Soldier. On one hand, Tony's departure was a factor, and Cap desperately needed a more experienced aerial force. After all, while Vision could fly, he was still a novice in terms of maneuverability, and Cap was a bit hesitant to use him as air support. On the other hand, there was Antonia herself. After the fall of the Red Room, Antonia's true nature had been liberated, and she'd actually become quite the chatterbox. Especially since Sherlock and Tony teamed up to get Antonia a pair of cybernetic prosthetics, she'd completely transformed into a chatterbox. During a mission, the action was intense, with deadly attacks unleashed, while Antonia's stand-up comedy filled the air. The contrast was too much for Cap, a seasoned veteran, and even Antonia's mentor, Black Widow, to handle. The tearing feeling was too intense. Most importantly, just listening to Antonia's trash-talking stand-up was enough to make one imagine the situation on the other side, making it incredibly distracting. So, just as Captain needed air support, he swapped Antonia's mission with Falcon. After all, Antonia's combat prowess and experience were already quite impressive. Besides not being able to fly, she was practically a complete jack of all trades, which Captain and the others felt comfortable with. However, Captain hadn't anticipated this fact becoming Sherlock's leverage over him. Crucially, even if Captain felt bitter, he couldn't express it. After all, he couldn't tell Sherlock that he had replaced Falcon because he disliked Antonia's talkativeness. He could only swallow his frustration, helplessly watching Sherlock, who was currently engaged in a heated argument with Vision. A sense of powerlessness welled up within Captain. Honestly, Captain America hadn't felt this powerless before facing the Red Skull. Sherlock truly lived up to his reputation as a troublemaker. Compared to Captain America's frustration, the rest of the team seemed much happier. After all, while Sherlock was often the troublemaker, with him around, a serious mission could often take a strange turn. But it had to be admitted that this troublemaker's skill at cleaning up after himself was exceptional, and most importantly, the atmosphere of the entire mission began to lighten up. At least, with the exception of Captain America, everyone else enjoyed this light-hearted and enjoyable atmosphere, as long as Sherlock wasn't targeting them, of course. As for Sherlock, honestly, he hadn't found arguing with Jarvis so difficult before. But now, arguing with Vision, a nonsensical person who had inherited Jarvis's memories, made him feel like he was losing. Just as Sherlock was about to be defeated, about to roll up his sleeves and run to challenge Vision, Hawkeye's voice rang out over the intercom. "I apologize for interrupting your verbal duel, but I've noticed something fishy. That garbage truck on the street looks incredibly suspicious. It's already passed by at least 5 trash cans without stopping to clean them. And most importantly, I just saw it collide with a car on the side of the road, and it didn't even stop to check." Hawkeye's voice was like heavenly music to the captain. He ignored Sherlock and Vision and immediately plunged into his mission. Vision and Sherlock fell silent. After all, they had to focus on the business. "Okay, Falcon, check to see if there's anything odd about the garbage truck," Hawkeye reported. "Roger," Falcon replied, and began to fly the drone behind him to scan the suspicious truck. The results were quickly transmitted to the controller on Falcon's arm. Upon seeing the results, Falcon's playful expression faded, and he began to explain to the others. "According to the scans, the garbage truck has reached its maximum load capacity, and the driver is armed. This doesn't look like a garbage truck, but more like..." Before Falcon could finish his words, the captain and Falcon spoke in unison. "Rampaging car, to move. Their target isn't the police station. Falcon, share the coordinates with the others, track the garbage truck." With that, the captain spun around, snatched up his helmet and shield from the table, and without hesitation, smashed through the second-floor window and leaped down. Watching the captain's movement, Sherlock stared speechlessly at the window the captain had broken, then casually fired another shot to restore it. Then, calmly adjusting his clothes, he calmly opened the door and walked out. Sherlock descended the stairs to the top floor of the small inn, retrieved a long-prepared flying carpet from his divine realm, and boarded it. After a moment's thought, Sherlock cast another disillusionment charm on himself, then, satisfied, controlled the carpet and pursued. Sherlock's complaints were spot on. Crossbones had to be crazy to attack the police station, as Captain planned, and then infiltrate with the items he'd obtained there. For Hydra, especially the increasingly frenzied Hydra under Crossbones' leadership, charging headfirst was the right approach. By the time Sherlock arrived at the biological laboratory researching biochemical weapons on a flying carpet, Wanda was outside the building, using chaos magic to extract the anesthetic gas that Hydra had injected into it. Falcon was shielding Wanda from behind, while the rest of the group had already rushed into the building, which still contained lingering anesthetic gas. "What? You dared to charge in without a gas mask? Come on, these are the Avengers. Even if they didn't have that many enemies, didn't they? Would it be that hard for the Avengers to snatch a gas mask from the enemy?" And Wanda was still pumping out a gas. Watching Wanda struggle to drain the air with chaos magic, Sherlock watched as Falcon stood behind her, using his 2 massive wings as a human shield. Sherlock felt helpless, realizing that neither Wanda's nor Sherlock's magic had yet reached full maturity. After all, there were countless ways to resolve the situation, but Wanda chose the most thankless one. Undeterred, he appeared, striking low and knocking out the Hydra that was still attacking them with 2 powerful shots. Sherlock landed right beside Wanda and began his magical training. Sherlock drew his wand, cleaned it with 1 shot, and repaired it with another. The biological research facility, once battered by the Hydra attack, was instantly restored to normal. Even the poisonous gas vanished without a trace. "Wanda, don't be rigid when using magic. Take the spell of cleansing for example. When you use it, it's up to you to decide what you want to clean. Don't forget what I once told you. The essence of magic is that wishes come true. You just need to determine your goal. As for the rest, as long as you choose the right spell, magic will automatically help you get it done. In some special cases, even without a spell, magic will help you fulfill your wish. Don't listen to the captain's advice from those muggles. They don't understand magic, nor will they understand the wonders of magic. Most importantly, don't let muggle thinking constrain your imagination of magic." Sherlock led Wanda into the building while educating her about magic. It was hard to imagine what the captain had taught Wanda in 3 days. How could his apprentice, who was good at magic, start to pay attention to science? On the other hand, Falcon, who was beside Wanda, was a little upset when he saw that Sherlock made the originally troublesome poison gas disappear completely with just 2 waves of his wand. How should I put it? He was extremely envious of such a convenient ability. As for Sherlock, well, honestly, Sherlock was simply curious about who had set up this place. After all, biological weapons were against international law from the start, and Sherlock was genuinely curious about whose territory this was. Don't give Sherlock any Nigerian nonsense. These black guys can barely get enough to eat, and you expect them to understand biological weapons? As for the outcome, as expected, it was his current body's former nemesis, the eagle sauce. It can only be said that a dog can change its nature. Those black-hearted maggots at the eagle sauce top brass deserved a life of their own. Just as Sherlock was frantically gathering evidence, the captain's breathless voice rang through the communication. "Sherlock, I should be able to hear you complaining about me, right? And what do you mean by muggle?" "Well, let's just say that under Sherlock's leadership, complaining has become almost a necessary passive skill for every Avenger. Captain's complaint was late, but it arrived." End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.